A poor girl used the window of a luxury car as a mirror to fix her hair. Inside, a millionaire saw her and fell in love instantly. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. A vibrant city morning was just beginning to yawn awake. The buses were already packed with hurried passengers, the sidewalks teemed with people rushing to clock in at their jobs, and a warm, golden sunlight spilled onto the street corners. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from a modest cafe on the corner, mixing with the ever-present car exhaust that lingered over the roads. Among the bustle, Abigail Reyes stepped off a battered old bus. She was dressed in simple jeans that had seen better days, and a faded hoodie that barely shielded her from the early breeze. Her hair, dark and wavy, was pinned back in a loose bun that threatened to fall apart at any second. There was a thin film of perspiration on her forehead. She had been forced to sprint from the small boarding house where she lived to the bus stop, desperate not to miss a rare opportunity, an audition at the city's most prestigious dance academy. For as long as she could remember, dancing was her life's passion. Growing up in a cramped neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, she had discovered dance by peeking through the windows of a local community center. She would press her nose against the glass, watching wide-eyed as graceful ballerinas stretched and leapt, while sleek tap dancers stomped rhythms that set her heart racing. Even though her parents had passed away when she was just a child, her father from an illness that took him too quickly, and her mother from heartbreak soon after, Abigail held on to their memory through movement. Dance was her joy, her comfort, her way of feeling alive. But that morning, her ambition to become a professional dancer was overshadowed by practical worries. The audition started in less than half an hour, and the bustling city traffic made every step more urgent. Her worn-out sneakers squeaked against the pavement as she glanced nervously at her watch. The second hand seemed to tick faster than usual, or perhaps it was just her anxious heart playing tricks on her. The dance academy was still several blocks away. Each corner she turned greeted her with a crowd or a traffic jam, forcing her to weave through pockets of people in a desperate attempt to save time. That's when she spotted a sleek Bentley, polished to a mirror-like sheen, idling near the curb beside a modern glass building. It looked out of place amid the battered taxis and delivery trucks that clogged the street. An idea sparked in her mind, more out of necessity than vanity. She had no pocket mirror or reflective surface except for the tinted glass of that expensive car. The audition was crucial, and she needed to look presentable. Her hair, still damp from sweat and the morning humidity, was in dire need of a quick fix. She could at least rearrange the wayward locks and make herself look somewhat polished. Cautiously, she edged closer to the Bentley, heart pounding at the thought of being scolded for getting too close to something so clearly out of her league. The engine hummed softly, giving the impression of a sleeping beast that might roar if disturbed. But desperation overcame her embarrassment. She glanced around. No one seemed to pay attention, and then stepped up to the passenger side window. At first, the reflection was faint. She leaned forward, trying to catch the best angle. With hurried fingers, she pulled a couple of bobby pins from her pocket and attempted to secure her loose strands of hair. A faint flush of color spread over her cheeks as she realized that she must look ridiculous. Some random girl using a stranger's luxury vehicle as a personal mirror. As she carefully twisted the bobby pin into place, the window hummed. Before she could even register what was happening, the tinted glass began sliding down smoothly, revealing a man seated in the back. He was dressed in a refined suit that fit him as though it were tailored by the world's finest clothier. His hair was a light brown, stylishly combed. A quiet, amused smile played on his lips. For a fraction of a second, Abigail froze in embarrassment, an apology forming on her tongue. She was certain she would be reprimanded or dismissed by this stranger of obvious wealth and status. Maybe he'd think she was about to beg him for money or worse. Yet what she saw in his eyes wasn't contempt or annoyance. Instead, it was curiosity, perhaps even intrigue. "Pardon me," he said in a calm, measured voice, "but are you fixing your hair in my window?" She wanted to vanish on the spot. "I'm so sorry," she managed, taking a step back. I didn't mean to." The man in the suit leaned closer, tilting his head as though examining her carefully. The street noise around them faded for an instant, as though time itself had paused to watch this unexpected encounter. She instinctively glanced away, clinging to the bobby pins in her hand. "No need to apologize," he replied, the faintest trace of a smile still gracing his lips. "I'm just not used to someone using my car for that. It's quite unique." Heat flooded her cheeks. She half expected him to raise the window again and order the driver to speed off. Instead, he studied her with a gaze that felt strangely kind. She forced herself to speak again before her nerves could sabotage her. My hair was a mess," she admitted, voice trembling slightly. "There's an important audition and I'm running late. I didn't want to look like this when I arrived." An audition? The man's curiosity seemed piqued by her words. His eyes sparked with interest as he considered her worn shoes, her expression the bobby pins trembling between her fingers. "A dancer, then?" he asked, nodding toward her battered tote bag, from which a pair of well-worn dance shoes peeked out. "Or am I mistaken?" Abigail felt her shoulders relax a fraction. "Yes, a dancer. Or at least I hope to be if I manage to get to the audition on time." He gave a quiet laugh, and something about that gentle sound made her heartbeat skip. "Where do you have to go?" he inquired, leaning his arm over the back seat in a gesture that revealed the opulent interior of the Bentley. She could smell the faintest trace of cedar cologne drifting out, mingling with the city's haze. At that moment, the driver, an older gentleman in a black uniform, glanced over his shoulder questioningly. The occupant in the back seat lifted his hand, signaling the driver to wait. Then he returned his focus to Abigail. She quickly explained the address of the audition, stumbling over her words. The man nodded thoughtfully. "That's not exactly nearby," he remarked. "Traffic is a nightmare today." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of time pressing on her. The audition was inching ever closer. If she didn't get moving now, she'd stand no chance at her dream. "Please excuse me," she said, stepping back from the Bentley. "I should—" He didn't let her finish. With a quiet, decisive confidence, he unlatched the door from inside. "William Harrison," he said, offering his name like a gentle invitation. "But you can call me Will, and you're—" "Abigail," she managed softly, still somewhat stunned. "Abigail." He tried out her name as though testing the melody on his tongue. Then he pushed open the car door from the inside. "If your audition is important, I could give you a ride." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline she had not expected. Her gaze darted from the posh interior of the Bentley to the busy street. Part of her was screaming that this was insanity, accepting a ride from a total stranger, a man whose wealth was apparent from the cut of his suit alone. Another part of her, the part that had grown used to facing daily adversity, saw only a single chance. If she turned him down, she might never make it in time. I don't want to impose," she whispered, voice shaky with a mix of caution and need. His smile deepened, illuminating a handsome face that probably graced tabloids and business magazines. "If you're worried about me, I promise there's no ill intent," he replied gently. "In fact, think of it as me repaying you for showing me a novel use for my car window." In a small quiver of hesitation, she looked around. Passers-by marched on, each caught in their own routines, oblivious to the story unfolding next to the sleek black Bentley. Above her, the towering buildings cast shadows onto the street, as if urging her to decide before it was too late. She swallowed, her heart pounding so loudly she feared he might hear it. I would really appreciate it," she finally conceded. "Then come in," he said, stepping aside so she could climb into the plush seat. She had never been inside anything so refined. The seats were upholstered in fine leather that seemed to cradle her with impossible softness. The dashboard glimmered with brushed metal and dark wood accents. As soon as the door closed, William addressed his driver. "She has an audition. We need to get to the Roseland Arts Complex as quickly as possible." The driver gave a polite nod, expertly merging the Bentley into the dense city traffic. Abigail's eyes flickered to the swirling cityscape outside the tinted windows. In the hush of the Bentley's opulent interior, she tried to calm her nerves. The seat felt more comfortable than any bed she had ever slept in. The faint aroma of high-end leather and William's subtle cologne lingered in the cool air. She sneaked a sideways glance at the man now seated beside her. When their eyes met, she noticed something. A gentle warmth, a sense of easy confidence. His posture, the way he angled toward her with genuine curiosity, put her a bit more at ease. Still, thousands of questions churned in her mind. Why was he being so kind? What did he want? And how on earth would she repay him if she actually secured a role at the academy? But for now, she let those thoughts fade. She was in a race against time, and this unexpected savior was ensuring she had a fighting chance. The city whirred by, horns honking incessantly, traffic lights blinking like half-hearted guardians of chaos. Yet inside the Bentley, an improbable calm enveloped them. It was as though they existed in a separate dimension, parted from the frantic world outside. William cleared his throat, his gaze still lingering on her. "So, tell me about the dance you're going to audition for. Contemporary? Ballet? Jazz?" Her lips parted in surprise. No one in her daily life ever asked about these details. People rarely cared about her ambitions. "Contemporary," she answered softly. "But the academy sometimes merges modern with classical elements. They want versatile dancers." He nodded. "Impressive. Sounds like quite a challenge." A hint of pride sparked in her chest. "It is, but it's been my dream for a long time," she said. "I spent years dancing at local community centers, saving up every spare coin for classes or workshops. I still owe a friend who covered part of my bus fare this week, but it's worth it." Hearing her speak, William's eyes were filled with something akin to admiration. She wasn't just some random girl with fleeting aspirations. She was a young woman who had poured her soul into every single pirouette and leap, forging hope out of adversity. They fell silent for a moment, the hum of the Bentley's engine filling the air. Abigail's heart was still restless, uncertain of what might unfold. Her instincts urged her to remain cautious, but a flicker of gratitude battled the doubt. Perhaps not everyone with wealth and power intended harm. The Bentley slowed at a congested intersection. The Roseland Arts Complex was just a few blocks away. Her stomach churned with a combination of excitement and nerves. "Please let me be on time," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You will be," William responded in a gentle tone, their eyes locked again. In his gaze, she sensed an unexpected reassurance, a subtle kindness that made her wonder who he really was beyond the expensive suit and the air of quiet confidence. As they neared the academy, that question kept drifting through her thoughts. Who is William Harrison, and why did he care enough to offer her this ride? And would this brief, extraordinary encounter end the moment she stepped out of the Bentley's protective embrace? The Roseland building finally loomed into view, its tall glass facade sparkling under the mid-morning sun. Abigail couldn't stop her knees from trembling. The driver pulled up to the curb, skillfully avoiding a chaotic tangle of taxis. William straightened his jacket and glanced at her with an encouraging smile. And just like that, an unspoken tension filled the quiet car. Both seemed aware that once the door opened, their paths might diverge forever. She carefully reached for the door handle, uncertain how to thank him for this unbelievable favor. But as she opened her mouth to speak, William leaned forward, his voice warm. "Good luck, Abigail. And if you need a ride home, I'll wait." Her chest tightened. He was offering another kindness, even though they had just met. Words failed her for a second, so she simply nodded. "Thank you," she finally breathed. "You don't know how much this means to me." A small smile curved on William's lips. "I have a feeling I do." She slipped out of the Bentley, shoulders squared, heart thumping like a drum in her ears. The building's doors stood in front of her, intimidating, thrilling, and bursting with possibility. Before stepping inside, she paused, glancing back at the Bentley. William Harrison was still watching, his eyes steady upon her. In that moment, she felt the city swirl around her, the unstoppable rush of deadlines and routine. Yet, in the hush between them, something new was born. Could it be admiration, a seed of hope, perhaps even the faint stirrings of love? She shook away the fanciful thought. She had an audition to conquer. Romance would have to wait. Straightening her spine, she walked through the doors, determined to give the performance of her life. Little did she know, the audition was not the only test awaiting her. For behind that tinted window, William Harrison, heir to the Harrison family empire, had already felt a quiet enchantment, one that would soon bloom into something far greater than either of them imagined. Outside the towering glass doors of the Roseland Arts Complex, William watched as Abigail disappeared into the building's lobby. He lingered, heart unexpectedly abuzz, an odd sensation for a man who, by his own admission, had seen much of what the world had to offer. In his realm of corporate negotiation and glittering galas, where everything was polite smiles and hidden agendas, true sincerity was a rarity. Yet he felt he'd glimpsed it just now, in her hurried steps and hopeful eyes. He relayed a quick message to his driver. "Park somewhere discreet, but stay close. I'll be waiting for her." The driver was a tad surprised. William Harrison's schedule rarely allowed for such spontaneity. Indeed, if the man's time were measured strictly by business, he should have been downtown at a high-stakes finance meeting, poring over profit margins and contractual fine print. But at that moment, some gentle pull commanded him to remain right where he was. He glanced down at his phone, calls from his assistant, missed messages from colleagues. Yet each notification felt trivial compared to the stirring curiosity that had taken root in him since meeting Abigail. He remembered the flush on her cheeks when she'd realized he was watching her use his car window as a mirror. He recalled her trembling but determined voice as she spoke of her big audition. She had an air of unvarnished honesty that stood out starkly against the polished artificiality of his daily life. She was real. Perhaps that was all the reason he needed to wait. Inside the building, Abigail arrived at the sign-in table, panting from her rush. Several other dancers were milling about the foyer, some stretching, others chatting tensely with each other. She scanned the faces, athletic and precise, each dancer brimming with carefully honed technique. Intimidation threatened to coil around her heart, but she swallowed back the feeling. The staff member at the table, wearing a bright Roseland lanyard, spotted her approach. "Name?" asked the staffer, holding a pen over a long list. "Abigail Reyes." The staffer, who was clearly juggling the demands of at least 5 different tasks, skimmed the roster. "All right, you'll be number 47. Auditions will be in Studio 3, down the hall to the left. Warm-ups have already started." Abigail took the number sticker with a polite nod. "Thank you," she whispered, her nerves jumping all over again. She pinned the number onto the front of her hoodie, exhaling to slow her galloping pulse. This was it, her one chance to seize an opportunity that might change everything. With shaky hands, she slid her old dance sneakers off and replaced them with a battered pair of soft ballet shoes. A few of the other dancers eyed her in a subtle once-over, noticing the worn condition of her footwear, her simple clothes. But she was used to that. She'd learned not to shrink under such scrutiny. Studio 3 stretched before her in a vast rectangle of polished hardwood floors and mirrored walls. A row of large windows allowed bright light to cascade in. About 20 dancers had already begun warming up at the bar, long, elegant limbs rising in fluid arcs. Their hair was styled into perfect buns or neat ponytails, their leotards and tights professional and pristine. Abigail quietly joined them, a pang of self-consciousness tightening her chest. She tried not to think about how ragged her attire must appear next to the rest. She reminded herself that skill, not style, would be her ticket in. Then she took a place at the end of the bar, performing gentle pliés and stretches to loosen her muscles. She felt the burn in her calves, the pull in her hamstrings. Although her routine was sometimes improvised, she'd never had the resources for top-tier dance academies. She poured into each movement the discipline she'd cultivated through countless hours of self-training and community classes. Just as she began to settle into the environment, the studio door opened. A sharp-looking woman in a black turtleneck and perfectly slicked-back hair strode in. She was flanked by two more individuals, one carrying a clipboard, the other with a portable speaker and tablet. All three exuded an air of authority, and the entire group of dancers reacted instantly, standing taller and turning to face the arrivals. "Good morning," the woman in the turtleneck called out, her voice crisp, resonant, accustomed to commanding a room. "I am Celeste Harrow, Artistic Director here at Roseland. We're looking for new talents for our upcoming performance season. We want to see raw skill, expression, and readiness to learn. Now, if you'd all line up, we'll begin with a simple sequence." Abigail took her place in line among the other dancers. One by one, they were directed to the center of the floor, asked to demonstrate a short combination that blended classical pirouettes and contemporary leaps. Some seemed to glide weightlessly, their spins and turns so effortless that she wondered if they'd ever known real hardship. Others showed slight wobbles or moments of uncertainty, quickly disguised behind well-practiced smiles. As she waited for her turn, her throat felt sandpaper dry, her heart a relentless drum. She replayed the memory of William's parting words in her mind. "Good luck, Abigail, and if you need a ride home, I'll wait." She allowed herself a fleeting smile at the recollection. There was something there, an odd comfort. She thought about how he'd looked at her, unbothered by her rumpled clothes or her apologetic demeanor. Rather, he seemed intrigued, as though he saw something deeper than appearances. She inhaled, letting that memory embolden her. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped forward, took her place at center, and faced Celeste Harrow. The music started, a slow, haunting piano melody that evolved into a measured beat. Abigail lifted her arms, beginning with a delicate arabesque. She let her spine curve gracefully, her arms extending as though propelled by invisible currents. Then, with a breath, she pivoted into a spin. For the next half-minute, it was as if time folded in on itself. Each movement told a piece of her story. The longing of nights spent dancing alone in a cramped living room, the heartbreak she'd felt upon losing her parents, the fierce hope that had kept her pushing forward despite every obstacle. Her leaps were not just technical showcases. They were emotional arcs, launching her body through space with an urgency that no fancy costume could replicate. She felt the wood of the floor beneath her battered shoes, heard the hush that had settled over the studio. When the combination concluded, Abigail found herself in a final pose, one knee bent, arms lifted skyward, chest open. A quiet hush followed. She slowly lowered her arms, catching Celeste Harrow's gaze. The director's expression was inscrutable, with just the faintest arc to her brow, as though intrigued yet carefully withholding praise. "That was unexpected," Celeste finally remarked, her tone measured. "I need to see more. Stay warmed up, Miss Reyes." Abigail bit back her relief, giving a quick bow of her head. "Yes, ma'am." She returned to the line, heart still hammering. One or two other dancers offered polite nods, uncertain how to respond. They'd seen something unique in her style, maybe lacking the polished refinement of a conservatory-trained ballerina, but undeniably spirited. Through the rest of the audition, she worked to maintain that focus, that sincerity. After nearly 2 hours of combinations, improvised tasks, and repeated leaps, Celeste and her assistants asked the dancers to wait outside the studio for the final list of callbacks. Stepping into the hallway, Abigail felt both exhausted and electrified. Her muscles trembled from exertion and a dull ache throbbed in her feet. Still, adrenaline buzzed through her veins. She settled onto a bench, trying to steady her breathing. Around her, clusters of dancers whispered, some riding the high of confident performances, others lamenting stumbles. She quietly massaged her ankles and sipped from a small bottle of water, thinking of everything that had led her to that very moment. She'd done her best. Whether it was enough, she had no clue. Minutes ticked by like hours. Finally, the door reopened. Celeste's assistant, a petite brunette who seemed to maintain an air of professional calm, emerged with a single sheet of paper. "These are the callbacks," she announced, pinning the page to the hallway bulletin board. There was an immediate surge of bodies toward the board. Abigail waited a few beats, hands clammy, breath shallow. This was it. Her future might hinge on that list. Steeling herself, she rose and joined the throng, scanning from the top. Annabelle Chen, Mark Rossetti, Crystal Dugard. Her heart sank fractionally as she scanned line after line. But then she found it. Abigail Reyes. A warm flush of relief surged from her chest right through to her fingertips. She nearly doubled over, exhaling with raw gratitude. For a moment, she feared she'd faint from the sheer wave of euphoria. "You made it?" asked a soft voice to her left. It was one of the dancers who'd been eyeing her shoes earlier. Despite the initial cautious glance, the girl now gave Abigail a tiny smile. "Yes," Abigail said, trying not to beam too broadly. I did." "Congratulations," murmured the other dancer before slipping back into the crowd. Abigail let the moment sink in. She had cleared the first hurdle. Callbacks would mean further auditions, more scrutiny, more demands. But it also meant she wasn't just some dreamer. She was a contender. As she left the building, her feet somehow felt both lighter and heavier all at once. Her body was worn out, but her spirit soared. The late morning sun had climbed higher, casting a bright sheen on the polished sidewalks. She headed toward the curb, scanning for the Bentley, uncertain if William was really still waiting. Rationality told her he couldn't possibly have spent hours there. People like him had diaries jammed with unstoppable business engagements. But to her astonishment, the Bentley was parked exactly where it had dropped her off. The moment she emerged, the driver stepped around and opened the passenger door with a polite nod. Abigail blinked in surprise. She peered inside, and there he was, William, leaning back against the seat, reading what looked like a sheaf of financial reports. He lowered the papers when he caught sight of her, his expression brightening. "Abigail," he greeted, sounding genuinely pleased. "How did it go?" She couldn't contain the shy smile that tugged at her lips. "I got a call back," she answered, voice trembling with excitement. "I mean, I haven't been accepted fully yet, but it's a start." He closed the folder of documents on his lap and leaned forward, delighted. "That's fantastic news. Congratulations. Please, get in." Still too surprised to manage a polished response, Abigail eased into the plush seat once more. The door closed gently behind her, the world outside briefly muffled. Once the driver was back in his place, William instructed him to start heading out, and the Bentley glided into traffic. "Thank you," Abigail said suddenly, her voice hushed. "I probably wouldn't have made it on time without your help, and then waiting here all that time, that was incredibly kind." A hint of a smile danced on William's lips. "I'm glad it worked out. How do you feel?" She cradled her arms around herself, trying to stretch out the tension of the audition. "Relieved, terrified, excited. My feet are killing me," she admitted with a laugh. "But I'm happy." Her honesty broke through the usual politeness he heard from people in his circle. There was a raw wonder in the way she spoke, lacking the filters and inhibitions of someone used to constant self-censorship. He watched her gently rub her ankles and noticed the frayed edges of her ballet shoes poking out from her bag. A swirl of sympathy and admiration flickered across his heart. "Do you have somewhere you need to be now? I could take you back home or anywhere else," he offered. She fiddled with a loose thread on her hoodie's sleeve. "Actually, I'd planned to do a shift at the diner where I work, but not until later." He inclined his head, considering. "How about we grab something to eat first?" he suggested. "Unless you're exhausted?" Abigail's immediate instinct was to refuse. She worried what assumptions he might have, or what it might mean to accept another favor. But there was a dull roar of hunger in her stomach, and the meager snacks she'd packed wouldn't do much to refuel her drained body. She realized also that she felt strangely comfortable around him. "All right," she replied hesitantly, "but maybe somewhere not too pricey?" William nodded in genuine understanding. "I know just the place. Calm, casual, and with decent coffee. My treat." She opened her mouth to protest, but the sparkle in his eyes softened her. She allowed herself the smallest indulgence of feeling safe, of letting him be momentarily chivalrous. She told herself it was just lunch, not a permanent arrangement. So she nodded, grateful yet cautious. "Okay," she whispered, folding her hands in her lap. Through the Bentley's windows, the city sprawled, fast-paced, unrelenting, full of possibilities and perils. As they turned onto a tree-lined avenue, she gave herself permission to feel the faint flutter of excitement at being around this intriguing man. Her future might still be uncertain, but in that moment, as she rode with William Harrison to an unknown lunch spot, the world shimmered with promise. The Bentley glided along a series of back streets until it reached a quieter part of the city, where the usual cacophony of traffic merged with the rustle of leaves from old sycamore trees. Abigail gazed out the window, watching shops roll by, local boutiques, a cozy bookstore, a small art gallery. She wondered if William had deliberately chosen this area to avoid the usual midday bustle, or if he simply had a fondness for these tucked-away corners of town. Eventually, the car pulled up to an understated cafe with tall windows and a faded sign that read, "The Sunlit Bean." It was perched on a charming street lined with flower boxes and slender benches. Even before stepping out, Abigail could tell the place was more intimate than any fancy downtown restaurant. A wave of relief washed over her. She worried she'd be taken somewhere far beyond her comfort zone, but this cafe felt calm, almost homely. They climbed out, and William let his driver know they'd call him when they were finished. Then he joined Abigail on the sidewalk, the midday sun catching hints of copper in his light brown hair. Despite the crisp elegance of his suit, he somehow blended naturally into this unpretentious setting. Inside, an inviting hush enveloped them. The decor was warm, soft cream walls, wooden tables, old movie posters. A glass display of pastries near the front counter showcased croissants, fruit tarts, and muffins. Overhead, gentle acoustic music wove through the air. A barista with a friendly smile stood ready, waiting for their order. William selected a quiet table by a window that faced a row of potted plants. The seat was a simple wooden chair, far removed from the plush comfort of the Bentley. As soon as Abigail sat, she felt a twinge of self-consciousness about her hoodie and scuffed ballet shoes, but William's relaxed demeanor quickly reassured her. There was no trace of judgment in his gaze. Instead, she sensed curiosity and a sort of subdued excitement. "What do you normally drink?" he asked, flipping open the menu. She shrugged, feeling a little flustered. "Usually just plain coffee. Maybe a pastry if I can afford it." He offered a soft grin. "Well, today it's my treat, remember? And you've definitely earned something more than plain coffee after that audition. Pick whatever you'd like." She scanned the menu. There were fancy lattes with names like Cinnamon Whirl Cappuccino or Honey Almond Latte. A part of her wanted to try one, but she hesitated, wary of overstepping. In the end, She settled on a modest latte and a chocolate croissant. William ordered an Americano for himself and added a small array of pastries, 2 more croissants, a little custard tart, and a scone, despite her protests that it was too much. He waved off her concerns with an airy gesture. When the barista left, William leaned back slightly, regarding Abigail with thoughtful eyes. "So, tell me more about the audition process. You mentioned you got a call back, but what does that involve next?" She fiddled with the corner of the napkin in front of her. "Well, Roseland is one of the big names in the dance world around here," she explained. "They do a full performance season, modern, contemporary, occasionally a reimagined ballet. They hold open auditions to find new dancers. Today was just the initial round, basically to weed out anyone who's obviously not prepared." He nodded, genuinely engaged. "And you weren't weeded out," he said, his lips curving in a small smile, "which means they see promise in you." Abigail felt a mingled rush of pride and nerves. "Yeah, but the callback is going to be tougher. More advanced choreography, maybe some improvisation in front of the directors." She paused, tapping her fingers lightly on the tabletop. "I'll need to practice, and I don't exactly have a professional studio or top-tier trainer." "Could you enroll in classes to prepare?" he asked kindly. The question made her laugh wryly. "Classes aren't cheap," she said simply. "I work shifts at a diner, some nights bartending. Most of my money goes to rent and groceries. Anything extra I put aside for dance shoes or workshops. It's not enough for regular lessons at a top studio." William's eyes shifted, a certain focus sharpening in them. He seemed to be doing calculations in his head, maybe considering how to help. But she wasn't looking for pity, so she pressed on, hoping to steer the conversation somewhere else. "Anyway," she continued, "I'll find a way to practice, even if it means pushing the furniture aside in my living room. I guess, if I want it badly enough, I'll make it happen." Before he could respond, the barista returned with their drinks and pastries. The croissants looked flaky and golden, and Abigail's latte, topped with a tiny heart-shaped swirl of foam, seemed a modest luxury she rarely indulged in. They paused to thank the server, and William quickly placed a neat tip into the jar on the counter before settling back at the table. Abigail took a careful sip, savoring the warmth of the latte. She sighed contentedly. "This is really nice. Thank you." "It's my pleasure," William said, lifting his Americano for a quick taste. He licked a stray drop of coffee from his lips, then studied her. "So, why contemporary dance? What drew you to it?" She considered the question carefully. "There's freedom in it," she explained. "I adore ballet too. I love the discipline, the form, the incredible technique, but sometimes it can feel rigid. Contemporary lets me combine ballet structure with raw expression, you know? Lets me tell a story with movement." His eyebrows rose, a spark of admiration in his gaze. "Sounds like you've thought deeply about this." "Oh, I have," she answered with a light laugh. "Since I was little, I'd dance in the living room, pretend I was on stage. Even after my parents died, I kept dancing because it made me feel closer to them. They used to watch me with this gleam in their eyes, as if my dancing was magic or something." A sudden wave of emotion passed over her face. "I guess it became a way for me to cope, and eventually it just turned into my biggest dream." A comfortable hush settled between them while William digested that. He took a thoughtful sip of coffee, then spoke quietly. "I'm sorry about your parents. You must have been so young." Abigail nodded, not trusting herself to speak for a moment. The memory held both pain and tenderness. Pain at the loss, tenderness at how their presence had inspired her. "What about you?" she asked, trying to pivot the conversation. "Your life. Are you from here or somewhere else? You mentioned you had business to attend, but you chose to stay. That was really generous." William set his cup down. "I grew up in this city," he said. Went overseas for part of my education, then returned a few years ago to help manage my family's business. My father was a real estate investor, hotels, commercial complexes. When he passed, I sort of took up the mantle. Oh, she breathed, absorbing his words. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. He nodded. It can be. Sometimes it's interesting, meeting new people, traveling, but other times it's stifling. So many of the people in that world only see me for my last name or what deals I can bring them. I'm sorry, she said, seeing the flicker of resignation that crossed his face. It must be tough when everyone wants something from you. William shrugged lightly. It comes with the territory, and I'm thankful for what I have. But it's refreshing to meet someone who doesn't care about that side of things. Abigail felt her cheeks warm. She tore off a piece of croissant to occupy herself. Guess you're not used to people using your car window as a mirror either, she said, teasing lightly. No, that's a first, he replied, matching her playful tone. And I'm glad it happened. The conversation paused as they each took a few bites. The cafe, while modest, served an excellent pastry. Abigail found the croissant's buttery texture melting in her mouth, and the chocolate filling was sweet, but not cloying. Meanwhile, sunlight streamed in through the window, glancing across William's cheekbones and giving his expression a subtle glow. He set down his coffee and straightened somewhat, a reflective look in his eyes. I've got a question, he started. It might sound a bit forward, so feel free to say no, but I'd like to help you prepare for this callback. Maybe I can arrange a space for you to practice? I own a few buildings with studios, nothing fancy, but at least you'd have room and mirrors. Abigail's initial reaction was confusion, perhaps a hint of skepticism. What? He offered an open-palmed gesture. I mean, I have properties all over town. One of them used to be a small dance school that shut down last year. Long story. The space has been empty for months. If you need somewhere quiet to rehearse, you could use it. No strings attached, no charge. Just a safe place for you to work on your moves. Her mind whirled. It was beyond generous, yet it also felt too big. She'd only just met him, and he was offering her a rehearsal space? There was a logical fear inside her. Nothing came free, especially from men with money. But something in William's tone, in the gentle sincerity of his gaze, made her want to trust him. She carefully placed her croissant down. I don't know what to say, she admitted. It would mean everything. But are you sure? I can't possibly pay you for it. His smile softened. I'm sure. Think of it as my way of investing in art, or giving back to someone who needs a break. Seeing how dedicated you are, well, it's inspiring. He paused, shifting slightly in his seat. Of course, I wouldn't blame you if you're hesitant. You barely know me. I just want you to have the best chance at this callback. Abigail studied the last swirl of foam in her latte, her pulse thrumming. Should she accept? A small voice in her head cautioned her about relying on him too much, about entangling their lives. Yet, realistically, she knew she had no real space to practice properly, a location that was safe, with mirrors and enough room to leap without crashing into a lamp. This was exactly what she needed. And for him, a wealthy man, maybe it was just an empty building. No big deal. She looked up, letting her shoulders drop as she exhaled. I really do appreciate it, she murmured. And yes, I'd love to use that space, as long as you're not expecting something in return that I can't give. His expression was immediate reassurance. I'm not, he said gently. Let's just say I have faith in your potential. Maybe one day I'll see you performing at Roseland, and I'll know I played a small part in helping you get there. A quiet, charged moment lingered between them, something that glimmered with possibility. She could sense the sincerity in him. It struck her that William, for all his wealth, seemed as isolated as she sometimes felt in her everyday struggles. Different worlds, same loneliness. All right, she said at last, a small but genuine smile lifting her lips. Then, thank you. I'll accept. William returned her smile, a spark of relief in his eyes as though he too had been bracing for her to refuse. "Perfect," he declared softly. "We can visit the studio whenever you're ready. In the meantime, let's finish these pastries before I eat them all." She let out a laugh, tension ebbing from her posture. The two of them returned to easy banter, discussing everything from favorite music to random city landmarks. She discovered that he had an affinity for quiet corners of the city, old theaters, historical buildings. He learned that her biggest dream beyond dance was to travel to Brazil someday and learn the samba from local dancers, an aspiration she'd once read about in a magazine while waiting for a bus. Time slipped by unnoticed. The cafe filled with a gentle afternoon hush as a few more customers strolled in. At a neighboring table, a young couple scrolled through photos on a phone while sipping iced lattes, and across the room, an older man perused a thick newspaper, occasionally glancing up to take in the ambient chatter. Finally, William checked his watch, a subtle, elegant piece that matched his tailored suit. "I hate to end this, but I need to drop you off wherever you prefer and then head to a meeting that I'm already late for. My assistant's going to kill me," he said with a wry grin. Abigail also glanced at her phone, realizing she was nearing her own shift at the diner. She felt an odd twinge of sadness at the idea that their conversation would end, but she quickly pushed it aside. "Yes, I should get moving too. The diner I work at is about 20 minutes from here by bus, so if you could—" William stood, shaking his head. "Let me drive you. Or rather, let my driver do so," he offered. "No need for the bus." She hesitated only briefly. "All right," she agreed, remembering what it felt like rushing on foot earlier that morning. Her ankles were still sore from all the leaps and spins. They paid. William insisted once more on covering everything, and stepped back out into the sunlight. Late noon had arrived, warming the sidewalk. With a quick call, William summoned his driver. Within minutes, the polished Bentley eased around the corner, its engine whisper quiet. Inside the car again, Abigail settled against the seat, letting herself sink into its comfort. William tapped out a text message to confirm his upcoming business appointment, then turned to her. "Where's your diner?" he asked, retrieving an address on his phone for the driver. She gave him the location with a slight blush, unsure how to explain that it was in a scruffier neighborhood, well away from the city's glamorous hubs. But if William noticed, he gave no sign of judgment. He simply passed the details to the driver, who navigated through the city streets with expert ease. They rode mostly in silence for a few blocks, occasionally sharing a comment about something they glimpsed outside the window, like a street performer juggling or a bright mural on an old factory wall. When they were several minutes away, William cleared his throat, turning to her with a gentle seriousness. "You'll text or call me about your practice schedule?" he asked. "I'll have to set up the building for you, make sure the utilities are on. Maybe I can show you around soon." "Yeah, absolutely," she answered. She'd have to find the words to explain to her roommate, who was also her landlord, why she wouldn't be dragging the couch aside to rehearse as often. A smile tugged at her lips as she imagined the excitement in her roommate's eyes, though her friend might also be suspicious of such generosity from a stranger. As they neared the diner, the streets grew narrower, more congested. Small corner shops with hand-painted signs and modest apartments packed side by side reflected a world far from the polished enclaves William likely inhabited. Still, he peered out with a quiet, observant gaze, absorbing it all. The Bentley came to a stop in front of a worn-looking door with a neon sign that buzzed overhead. "Oscar's Diner!" Abigail recognized her manager's silhouette through the glass. She turned to William. "Thank you again for everything." He leaned slightly, his voice warm but calm. "Don't mention it, really. I'll be in touch about the studio and good luck with your shift." Abigail's heart quivered, struck by gratitude and a confusing swirl of emotion. She wanted to say something more, something to convey how incredible this day had been, how unexpected and life-altering. but words escaped her. Instead, she offered a smile, one that softened the lines of tension often etched around her eyes. Then she stepped out of the Bentley, feeling its refined hush replaced by the hurried clamor of a normal working day. A last glance over her shoulder revealed William watching her depart, returning her smile with one of his own, a silent promise that this connection between them was far from over. With that, she pushed into the diner, ready to slip back into the routine of taking orders and refilling coffee cups. Yet everything had shifted. Hope, once a fragile spark, now burned bright within her. And outside, William Harrison's car pulled away, merging into city traffic, but not before he cast one lingering look through the tinted window, already anticipating the next time he'd see the dancer who had used his Bentley's reflection to fix her hair, and in so doing, upended his carefully ordered life. The early evening sun cast the diner's interior in a warm, golden hue. Abigail had barely clocked in when her manager waved her over to a booth that needed clearing. She grabbed a cloth and maneuvered between tables, her sore muscles reminding her of the morning's rigorous audition. Still, each twinge in her calves or ankles brought a quiet spark of satisfaction. She'd done it. She was going to callbacks at Roseland. She forced her mind back to the task at hand, giving the tabletop a thorough wipe. A few crumbs tumbled onto the checkered floor, and she made a mental note to sweep up later. As she moved to the next booth, her co-worker Tanya, an older woman with a loud laugh and an endless supply of gossip, sidled up. "You're in a good mood," Tanya commented, arching an eyebrow. "Usually by this hour we're both complaining about our feet, but you seem light." Abigail tried to shrug it off nonchalantly. "Just had a good morning. My audition went okay," she admitted with a shy smile. "I got a call back, actually." Tanya's face lit up. "Seriously? That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you." Without waiting for a response, she bustled off, presumably to spread the news in the kitchen. The woman was unstoppable in her quest to share any tidbit of positivity or drama she could find. Abigail felt a touch self-conscious, but mostly grateful. Usually these four walls of the diner were her realm of hustle, balancing trays, taking orders, always short on time or energy. To share even a small dose of excitement here felt strangely empowering. When the dinner rush arrived, the place transformed into a whirlwind of clinking glasses and overlapping conversations. Abigail wove between booths, refilling water pitchers and delivering plates piled with burgers, fries, and the diner's famous homemade pies. She found herself smiling more than usual, even when a couple of customers were testy or impatient. The memory of William's unwavering gaze and the taste of that warm latte lingered in her thoughts. Eventually, night fell. By around 10 o'clock, the diner started to empty. Only a few tables remained occupied, a pair of students quietly studying, an exhausted trucker sipping coffee. Abigail and Tanya exchanged tired grins as they prepped for closing. The neon sign outside buzzed, reflecting dully on the diner's windows. "So, what happens now with that audition, exactly?" Tanya asked between wiping down salt shakers and stacking dishes. "You said callback, right?" "Yeah," Abigail replied, trying not to let her nerves bleed into her voice. "They'll give me a date, and I'll go back for a more advanced session. If that goes well, they might offer me a spot in the upcoming production, or at least consider me for the company." Tanya let out a dramatic swoon. "Imagine if you get it. You'll be famous, traveling the world. You'll forget all about this dumpy place." Abigail shook her head. "Oh, I could never forget the diner," she teased. "But traveling the world would be amazing." Her mind flashed to the patchy old poster she had pinned up in her bedroom, a collage of dancers, carnival pictures from Rio de Janeiro. One day, she'd love to see those sights in person. "Well," Tanya declared, pointing at her with a cleaning rag, "I'm rooting for you, kiddo." Soon, closing time arrived. Abigail counted her tips, stashing the small wad of dollar bills into her apron. She thanked Tanya and her manager, then slipped outside. The city night enveloped her, a swirl of headlights and the occasional distant siren. Her tiny one-room apartment was about half a mile away, and she walked, letting the hush of the late hour calm her. Still, her mind buzzed with thoughts of everything that had changed in the last 12 hours. She replayed her moments with William. Stepping into that Bentley, sitting across from him at the cozy cafe, sharing truths about dance and life. A part of her still wondered if she'd dreamt it all. Yet the memory of his voice and the promise of a practice studio were undeniably real. The question was, how would it all actually play out? Her roommate, Marina, was already asleep when Abigail slipped into the apartment. It was a cramped space, the living room doubling as Abigail's makeshift dance area. Typically, she'd do late-night stretching on the rug, replaying choreographies in her head. But tonight, the promise of a larger studio made her heart flutter. She changed into comfortable pajamas, brushed her teeth, and fell into bed. Despite her exhaustion, it took a while for her mind to settle. Eventually, the adrenaline faded, and she slipped into a deep sleep, lulled by hope. The next morning, her phone buzzed early with a text. Abigail cracked open her eyes, noticing rays of sunlight through the thin curtains. She fumbled for the device on her nightstand. The display showed an unknown number, and for a second, anxiety spiked. Then she remembered that William had promised to contact her. "Good morning, Abigail. This is William. Hope you slept well. I spoke with the building manager. The old dance studio is available. Would you like to see it today? Let me know." She reread the message twice, a small grin slipping across her face. No one she knew texted with that kind of polite formality. It was almost endearing. She typed back, "Hi, William. Good morning. I'm free afternoon. That would be great. Thank you." She hit send, feeling an excited flutter. Marina stirred in the corner, yawning and running a hand through her messy hair. The bedroom was basically one half of the main living space, separated only by a thin divider, so privacy was minimal. "Who are you texting this early?" Marina mumbled. "You usually sleep in on your day off." Abigail hesitated, then decided to share. "It's a friend. He's letting me practice in an old studio he owns. It's for my callback at Roseland." Marina's eyebrows shot up. "He owns a dance studio? This friend must be loaded." "It's complicated," Abigail said, biting her lip. "He's more like an acquaintance. We met yesterday and I guess he's well off." She braced for her roommate's skepticism, but Marina simply gave her a quizzical look. "Well, as long as it's safe. I mean, hey, free practice space, that's amazing, girl." Then, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Marina headed toward the little kitchenette. "You want coffee? I can make some. But we're out of sugar." Abigail smiled gratefully, heading into the kitchen. "Coffee's good, sugar or not." They each took a mug, sipping in companionable silence. Despite the rough edges of living in a cramped, low-budget apartment, moments like these, shared with a friend who'd known her ups and downs, felt like home. She told herself that no matter what new opportunities came her way, she'd keep her roots grounded in the people who had supported her when times were toughest. Around noon, her phone chimed again, announcing that William would send his driver to pick her up at the corner near her building. Abigail said a quick goodbye to Marina, who teased her with an exaggerated wave. "Have fun with your fancy new benefactor," before heading out. The day was bright, the sky a patchwork of white clouds that drifted lazily. Standing at the curb, she tried to quell the knot of nerves building in her stomach. She needed to remind herself that William's offer was genuine. Still, a tiny voice in her head wondered if some hidden catch might reveal itself. But the moment the sleek Bentley glided up, she banished that paranoia. The driver stepped out with a courteous nod, holding the door open for her. Inside, William greeted her with a warm smile. "Hey," he said, setting aside what looked like a legal document he'd been perusing. "All set for the studio tour?" She returned his smile, though hers was tinged with nerves. Yeah, thank you again for making this happen. William told the driver the address of the old dance school. As they pulled away, he explained, I haven't actually stepped inside this particular building in a while. My father acquired it years back, but it stopped operating due to financial troubles. I only recently confirmed it still has the mirrors and the basics you'd need. Abigail raised her eyebrows. So it's basically been empty? He nodded. A caretaker checks on it occasionally, but for the most part, yes, no one's used it. Might be dusty, so fair warning. A short drive later, they turned onto a street lined with small businesses, hair salons, convenience stores, a boarded-up movie theater. At the end stood a humble, single-story brick building with large windows, the remnants of a weathered sign overhead. Breckworth School of Dance. Some letters had fallen off, giving it a disheveled look. The surrounding sidewalks were cracked, and a faded mural on the adjacent wall depicted dancers in silhouette. William punched in a code on a small security box by the door. The lock clicked, and the door swung inward with a creak. He gestured for Abigail to step inside first. The interior was dim at first glance. William fumbled for a light switch near the entrance. A row of overhead fluorescents blinked to life, flickering a moment before settling into a steady glow. Dust motes floated in the beams of light. The main lobby area was empty except for a couple of worn couches and a reception desk. Beyond a small corridor, Abigail spotted a larger space that looked promising. Together they walked down the corridor until they reached a wide studio room. Mirrors, though streaked with dust, lined one wall. A full-length bar extended across the other side, chipped in places but still functional. The wooden floor looked surprisingly sturdy, if in need of a good sweep. Abigail's breath caught. Even in its neglected state, the room exuded the spirit of a place once alive with music, movement, and ambition. She could practically envision dancers gliding across the floor, teachers calling out corrections, the echo of tap shoes in the hallway. It's definitely dusty, William remarked, swiping a finger along one of the window ledges. But it seems intact. There might be some cleaning supplies in a closet around here. He turned to her, gauging her reaction. What do you think? Abigail stepped into the middle of the studio, scanning the mirrors, pressing her foot gently on a floorboard. It's perfect, she whispered. I mean, sure, it needs cleaning, but this is more space than I've ever had to practice before. And the mirrors... She turned in a slow circle, a slight thrill in her voice. I can actually see my form from all angles instead of guessing if my posture's correct. William smiled at her excitement. I can have someone come in to do a deep clean, repair anything that's broken, he offered. We can make it more comfortable. She spun around, shaking her head quickly. No, it's fine, really. I don't need anything fancy, just the basics. A spark of determination brightened her features. I can clean it myself. I'm used to scrubbing floors anyway. He laughed gently. All right, if that's what you prefer, at least let me handle any big fixes, okay? I don't want you dancing with a floorboard that might pop loose. Safety first. Abigail allowed a nod, feeling a surge of gratitude. He was investing so much in her success, and he expected nothing in return. At least he insisted he didn't. Was it simply an act of kindness, or was there more behind it? She pushed aside her doubts, not wanting to mar the moment. She paced around the studio, mentally imagining setting her phone on a windowsill to play music, warming up at the bar, leaps across the diagonal. Already her body hummed with the anticipation of practicing here. She paused in front of one of the mirrors, staring at her reflection. A girl with a messy ponytail, wearing simple leggings and a faded t-shirt. Behind her, William hovered, looking slightly out of place in his crisp attire, yet somehow content. He cleared his throat softly. I know this might feel overwhelming, but if there's anything else you need, extra lighting, a dance mat, or even just better speakers for your music, just say the word. Abigail met his gaze in the mirror. You've done plenty already, she said, turning to face him. Seriously, this is more than I could have dreamed of. In that instant, a delicate tension pulsed between them, not awkward, but charged with unspoken possibilities. His expression was gentle, but behind it, she sensed a stirring of something deeper. Maybe curiosity, maybe admiration. She swallowed, recalling how carefully he'd listened to her, how intently he'd watched her every move and gesture. It was as if he was discovering a world he'd never known existed. She gripped the bar, grounding herself. So what happens next? William exhaled, snapping himself out of whatever reverie he'd been in. Well, if you'd like, we can set up a schedule. I'll make sure you have a key and the alarm code so you can come and go when you need to rehearse. He paused, smiling a bit. You still have my number, right? She nodded. Yes. Text me if you need anything. I'll check with my property manager about cleaning, and maybe I'll drop by sometimes to see how you're doing, if that's okay. I don't want to intrude on your practice. A flicker of amusement curved her lips. Sure, she answered softly. But don't expect a performance every time you visit, she added with a playful arch of her brow. He chuckled, the sound warm in the hollow room. Deal. She glanced at the clock on her phone. I actually have a few hours free now. Mind if I start by cleaning and maybe do a short practice? William's eyes lit with approval. Go right ahead. Let me help you find the cleaning closet. They roamed through the back hallway until they discovered a dusty storeroom stacked with boxes of old dance uniforms, battered fold-out chairs, and an array of cleaning supplies. Within minutes, Abigail had rummaged out a broom and mop, while William tested the vacuum cleaner to see if it still worked. A small cloud of dust belched from it initially, making them both cough and laugh at the same time. For the next hour, they worked side by side, sweeping, wiping mirrors, pushing old boxes out of the studio corners. It was the simplest of tasks, yet it felt unexpectedly gratifying to do it with him. Whenever their eyes met over a swirl of dust or an awkwardly positioned cardboard box, a silent camaraderie flowed between them. There was something about the shared effort, two people from vastly different worlds uniting to breathe life back into this abandoned space, that made the moment almost magical. At one point, William tried to move a particularly heavy bookshelf alone, causing him to slip on some dust. He stumbled, landing on one knee with a startled grunt. Abigail rushed over, stifling a giggle as she helped him regain his balance. "You okay?" she asked, half laughing, half worried. He clutched his pride more than any physical injury. "I'm fine," he grumbled, brushing off his suit pants, now smudged with a dusty streak. "Guess I don't handle manual labor nearly as gracefully as you do." Her laughter escaped then, bright and genuine. The moment shifted from potential embarrassment to shared humor, forging yet another link in their growing connection. By the time they finished, the studio looked revived. The mirrors were clearer, the floor free of debris. A faint smell of lemon cleaner and possibility lingered in the air. Abigail wiped her forehead, a light sheen of sweat there. She felt a surge of satisfaction at seeing the transformation. William stood in the center of the room, hands on his hips, surveying the outcome with a grin. "It's actually quite a nice space," he remarked. "Never realized. With a bit more care, it could be truly great." Abigail moved to open a window, letting in a gentle breeze. The late afternoon sunlight streamed in, catching the reflective sheen of the mirrors and casting long shadows across the fresh-swept floor. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Really, this is a dream come true. I hope I don't sound ungrateful if I say I still can't believe it." He stepped toward her, standing just a few feet away. "You don't sound ungrateful at all," he replied. "I'm the one who's grateful you're letting me be a part of your journey." She caught his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. She wondered what exactly he meant by that. Before she could unravel it, William gently checked his watch. "I should go," he said. "A meeting soon. But you should stay. Use the space. Practice. I'll text you the alarm code. Just lock up when you're done." Abigail nodded, a swirl of emotions clouding her chest. "Okay?" He lingered as if he wanted to add something else. Then he nodded once more and turned, heading out of the studio with a last reassuring smile. The echo of his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. After the building door clicked shut, Abigail was alone in the open studio. For a moment the stillness felt profound, almost echoing with the memory of his presence. Then she inhaled, setting her phone on the windowsill and pulling up the audition music she'd recorded. She closed her eyes, letting the first notes wash over her. Slowly, she positioned herself in the center of the gleaming floor. Step by step, she moved through the routine from memory, the controlled spins, the extended lines, the leaps that soared across the open space. Each reflection in the newly polished mirror told her what she needed to correct, a subtle shift of alignment, a tighter turn. She lost herself to the music, allowing every emotion, hope, gratitude, nervousness about the callback, to fuse into her movements. And in that room she danced alone, but not lonely, buoyed by the sense that for the first time in her life, she wasn't scaling her dreams entirely by herself. The hush of the vacant studio, the gentle hum of the city just outside the windows, and the lingering memory of William's supportive gaze all seemed to promise that something new and wondrous was unfolding. She danced on, heart steady, determined to honor the gift she'd been given, and as the last note of music faded, she sank into a graceful pose, breathing hard, a glimmer of sweat on her brow, tears of fierce happiness stinging at the corners of her eyes. Because in that hush, amid the dust motes now swirling in golden late-afternoon light, she felt her dreams, once so distant, becoming something real enough to clutch in her outstretched fingertips. Abigail sank onto the studio floor, chest heaving, a thin sheen of sweat cooling on her skin. Her phone's music player had looped through her audition track a half-dozen times, yet she still craved more practice. Every leap, every spin, she wanted them crisper, more expressive. Even so, the improvement already felt tangible. Being able to see her form from head to toe in the mirrors was a game-changer. She pressed pause on the music and gazed around the space that had so quickly become her new sanctuary. The lingering scent of lemon cleaner reminded her of how she and William had spent the afternoon sweeping, mopping, laughing. Her mind floated back to the memory of him stumbling when he moved that heavy shelf. She couldn't help but grin at how human and genuine he'd seemed in that moment. She was discovering layers to William Harrison. Beneath the quiet confidence and wealth was a man capable of laughter, vulnerability, and, apparently, an earnest desire to help. She stood, exhaling to steady her pulse. It was time to head home and rest before work, but as she walked over to the windows to collect her phone, a small thud came from the hallway. Her heart kicked up a notch. She was pretty sure William had left, and the caretaker or manager wasn't scheduled to come by. Carefully, she inched toward the studio entrance. "Hello?" she called, voice echoing. "Is someone there?" The hallway was empty, quiet. Maybe she'd imagined the sound. With a shrug, she continued to gather her belongings. However, an uneasy prickle remained. She told herself it was nothing more than the natural creaks of an old building settling, or maybe the draft from a window. Still, she resolved to be cautious. When she left, she made sure to lock every door firmly and arm the newly provided security alarm system. Outside, the late afternoon light had turned a honey gold. She inhaled deeply, letting the crisp air refresh her. She caught a bus back to her apartment, hugging her dance bag to her side. Inside that bag lay a new sense of hope, the memory of a successful practice, and the flicker of something else she couldn't yet name, a gentle warmth whenever she thought of William. When William returned to his office, he was nearly an hour late for a meeting with a group of investors. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, scurried up to him, brandishing a clipboard. "Mr. Harrison, they're already in the conference room," she whispered, sounding slightly panicked. "I've tried to keep them occupied, but they're starting to ask questions." William shot her a reassuring look. "All right, let's not keep them waiting any longer." He strode into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, offering quick apologies for his tardiness. The men and women seated around the polished table were wealthy stakeholders, each with a vested interest in an upcoming development project near the city's waterfront, one of Harrison Enterprises' major undertakings. While they discussed blueprints, funding milestones, and projected returns, William's mind occasionally drifted. His gaze wandered to the windows that offered a panoramic view of the urban skyline tinted by the descending sun. He pictured Abigail in that dusty dance studio practicing her spins with fierce dedication. The memory tugged at him, a gentle pull of curiosity and admiration. He willed himself back to focus on the present conversation. Still, an undercurrent of restlessness thrummed through him. At some point, one of the investors, an older man with gray hair and a brisk tone, asked, "So, Harrison, where do you see this project in the next 5 years? We want your personal assurance on its profitability." William cleared his throat, forcing his attention to the matter at hand. "Absolutely. We've run projections with conservative estimates, and even in the lowest case scenario, we stand to—" He laid out the numbers, referencing the meticulous analysis his team had prepared. The group nodded along, evidently satisfied by his confident delivery. Yet, the moment the meeting ended, William felt a wave of mental exhaustion. He retreated to his private office, a spacious corner room with floor-to-ceiling glass boasting a panoramic view of the city. Valerie followed him in, dropping a thick folder onto his desk. "Here's the updated financial statement and some documents for tomorrow's media event," she explained. Then she paused, assessing his expression. "Is everything all right, Mr. Harrison? You've seemed preoccupied all day." He paused, leaning against his desk. "I'm fine, Val," he said softly, then offered a faint smile. "I just have other responsibilities on my mind." Valerie nodded, professional enough not to pry further. "Understood. I'll arrange the rest of your evening schedule. There's a charity gala in 2 hours, and your presence was requested." William exhaled slowly. "Yes, of course, I'll attend." Normally, these galas were part of his routine, mingling with city elites for donations, forging alliances. But tonight it felt like yet another scripted role he had to play. As Valerie left, William let his thoughts drift. The contrast between his world and Abigail's was staggering. Her modest apartment, the diner job, the deserted dance studio, and yet that spark in her eyes when she talked about her dreams. He found it more compelling than the millions at stake in any negotiation. For the first time in a long while, he found himself wanting to share something genuine, not for profit or prestige, but because it felt right. He checked his phone, wondering if she had texted. Nothing new. He considered messaging her first, maybe just to ask if she got home safely or how her practice went. But a trace of self-consciousness tugged at him. Would it seem pushy? Overly eager? He set his phone aside, deciding to wait. He'd see her again soon enough. A few evenings later, Abigail was just finishing a shift at the diner. The place had quieted after the dinner rush, and she was balancing a tray of used dishes when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She snuck a glance. William's name flashed across the screen. A mild flutter tickled her stomach. Once she cleared the dishes, she read the message. "Hi, Abigail. Hope you're well. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to check in about the studio. Maybe bring a friend who can advise on the flooring and see if we need any fixes before your next callback." She felt a glow of warmth at his continued concern. Quickly, she typed back, "Tomorrow afternoon works for me. I have a few hours free. Thank you again for everything." His reply came swiftly. "Great. I'll pick you up at 2. Can't wait to see how the studio's looking after you've practiced in it for a few days." Abigail tucked her phone away, a bright smile lingering on her face. Tanya, clearing another table, spotted her expression and raised an amused eyebrow. "Got a special someone, huh?" she teased. Abigail nearly dropped a fork. What? No, it's just, he's a friend, helping me out with my dancing." Tanya chuckled. "Uh-huh. A friend with a fancy car and a big heart by the sound of it. Abigail opened her mouth to protest but realized that anything she said might only feed Tanya's playful assumptions. She sighed and turned to refill a condiment bottle, hoping her co-worker would let it go. Yet a flicker of truth gnawed inside her. She wasn't sure how to define what William was to her. Kind benefactor? An ally in her dance journey? Or someone who, with each conversation, made her pulse skip? She quickly redirected her thoughts to the upcoming callback. She hadn't yet received the official date from the Roseland Academy, but Celeste Harrow's assistant had implied it would be announced soon. Time was ticking, and her technique needed refining. Every chance she got, she slipped into the old studio, adjusting her routine, working on transitions. Her leaps were higher, her lines more fluid, freed from the cramped living room. That night, as she closed out at the diner and trudged back to her apartment, her thoughts inevitably wandered to William. She replayed small moments, his earnest willingness to help clean, the softness of his tone when he asked about her parents, the quick smile that lit his face whenever she teased him about not being used to manual labor. A reluctant but undeniable feeling was beginning to grow, a curiosity about who William really was beyond the polished image. Yet doubt whispered, too. Men had shown interest in her in the past, but that interest quickly evaporated when they discovered her meager circumstances. She also knew the cautionary tales. Rich man takes interest in poor girl, only to break her heart. She wondered if this was simply a passing novelty for him, a philanthropic fling. But the sincerity in his eyes made her hope otherwise. The next day, just before 2 p.m., Abigail waited on the corner near her building. The breeze was mild and she tapped her foot nervously. The Bentley appeared right on time, sleek as ever. She slipped into the back seat, greeting the driver politely, then found William waiting inside, this time dressed in slightly more casual attire, dark jeans, a button-down shirt rolled up at the sleeves. He smiled warmly. "Hey," he said, setting his phone aside. "All ready to get some professional eyes on that studio floor?" She nodded. "Thank you for arranging it." They made light conversation on the drive. William mentioned the friend he was bringing, an interior designer named Audrey, who specialized in refurbishing older spaces. "She's curious about the building," he explained. "Figured she could offer some tips." When they arrived at the studio, Audrey was already outside, leaning against a small electric scooter. She was a petite woman with bright pink hair and an assortment of silver rings on each hand. She waved enthusiastically. "William, good to see you again," Audrey said, hugging him quickly before turning to Abigail. "You must be the dancer. Lovely to meet you." Abigail shook her hand, momentarily struck by Audrey's vibrancy. "Nice to meet you, too. Thanks for doing this." Audrey grinned. "No problem. I adore old dance studios, and Will told me you're breathing new life into this one." She followed them inside, carrying a toolkit and notepad. While Abigail gave a quick update on her practice routines, Audrey prowled around with a discerning eye, poking at floor seams, tapping on mirrors, and running her palm along the bar. She asked about the acoustics, the lighting, whether the windows were drafty. William trailed after her, occasionally glancing at Abigail to see if she was comfortable. After a thorough inspection, Audrey returned to the center of the room. "It's in better shape than I expected," she said, scribbling notes. "The floor's mostly solid, just a few boards we might want to refasten or reinforce. Mirrors need a bit of realignment in that far corner. The biggest upgrade you might consider is a new sound system because acoustics matter for dance. But that's not urgent. Otherwise, it's good to go." Abigail released a relieved breath. "That's wonderful news. I was worried we'd need major renovations." Audrey shook her head. "Nope. Just a little TLC. I can arrange workers for the floor and mirrors next week if that's okay. They'll be in and out in a day, maybe 2. Abigail glanced at William, uncertain. "I mean, that sounds amazing, but you're already doing so much. I don't have the money to—" William cut her off gently. "Don't worry about the cost, Abigail. This is still my property, technically. I'd like to fix it up so it's safe and functional. Consider it an investment in the building and in your success." Audrey beamed, evidently supportive of the plan. "I'll coordinate with you," she told William. "We can finalize details by tomorrow." Then she patted Abigail's shoulder. "Glad to see you have a real shot at that Rosalind callback. Keep dancing, girl." With that, Audrey departed, waving cheerfully from her scooter. Her small figure zipped away, leaving a hint of fresh energy in her wake. Inside the studio, William and Abigail were left alone again. The space felt momentarily lighter, as though Audrey's exuberance had banished all lingering dust. Abigail crossed her arms loosely, meeting William's gaze. "Thank you for all of this. I hope you know how much it means. I never expected—" He stepped closer, the warmth in his eyes unmistakable. "I'm just glad I can help," he said. Then, as if reading her anxiety, he smiled more brightly. "Shall we see some moves? I mean, if you don't mind me watching a bit." She laughed, feeling her cheeks flush. "Sure, but you might regret standing so close." He took a seat on a windowsill where a beam of sunlight cast him in a soft glow. Turning on her phone's music, Abigail began to dance. Just a short sequence, the same one she might use at the callback. She focused on her lines, the transitions, the emotional intensity. Each movement glided across the floor, no longer hindered by the fear of a squeaky floorboard or lack of space. William observed in appreciative silence. He didn't have the vocabulary to critique her technique, but he could sense the passion that radiated through each step. When she finally stopped, breathless, the track winding down, he looked genuinely awed. "That was incredible," he said softly. "I've never really witnessed dance like this up close. You make it look like storytelling without words." A flush of gratitude swept over her. "Thank you. It still needs work, but I'm trying to refine it." William hopped off the windowsill. "I'm sure you'll be more than ready when the callback date arrives." He hesitated, searching her expression. "Any news on that yet?" She shook her head. "Not yet. I'm checking my email constantly, though. I figure it'll be soon. The Academy's new season is starting in a couple of months, so they won't delay decisions too long." He nodded, hands sliding into his pockets. "Well, I hope you'll call me the moment you find out. I'll want to celebrate if it's good news." His smile made something in her chest flutter, an unfamiliar but not unwelcome sensation. "Okay," she said, swallowing the tiny spark of bashfulness that rose in her throat. "I will." They stood there for another moment, the hush of the studio folding around them. It felt as though they were suspended in some in-between realm, where their real lives, his corporate world and her humble one, barely mattered. Here, she was simply a dancer, and he was simply a man who believed in her. Eventually, William cleared his throat, casting a glance at his watch. "I need to get going. Board meeting this evening. Another round of suits, figures, and polite small talk," he said, half smiling. She exhaled softly. "Thanks for coming by, and for everything else." He gave a gentle nod, then paused, as if summoning courage. "Would you, maybe someday, like to go have dinner? A proper meal, not just coffee and pastries?" Her heart stumbled in her chest. Was he asking her on a date? She couldn't fully decipher it, but she sensed vulnerability in the question, a quiet hope. She thought of the times she'd avoided letting guys get too close because she feared losing focus on her dream. But something about William felt different. She met his eyes. "I'd like that," she said softly, allowing her lips to curve in a small, genuine smile. He seemed relieved, a subtle tension easing from his posture. "Great," he murmured. "We'll plan it soon." With that, he left, the soft click of the studio door marking his departure. Abigail stood motionless for a few heartbeats, the aftermath of his presence rippling through her like a faint echo. She sank to the floor, letting her mind replay the question he'd just asked. Dinner. together. The notion was both thrilling and scary. She'd never dated someone from a vastly different social sphere. And yet, as she stared at her reflection in the now clean mirrors, she couldn't ignore that glimmer of excitement in her own eyes. Later that evening, after another round of practice, she locked up the studio and headed home, her thoughts swirling. The hush of nightfall greeted her outside, and she navigated the city streets on foot, hugging her dance bag. Her muscles ached, and she was hungry, but a quiet contentment filled her. The possibility that her callback to Rosalind might intersect with the unfolding connection to William felt almost too good to be true. Yet, the most beautiful part of it all was that her dream no longer felt solitary. For once, a door had opened, maybe more than one door, and as she walked under the glow of street lamps, each step echoed with a newfound confidence. She would be ready for that callback, no matter how demanding it was. She had a safe, dedicated space to practice, a man who believed in her abilities, and a reason to hope that beyond the polished floors and mirrored walls, something else in her life was about to blossom just as gracefully. The next morning arrived with a hushed, rainy sky, a subtle drizzle that speckled the apartment windows and left the streets glossy in the half-light. Abigail stood by her small kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug. She was still trying to process the previous afternoon. William had invited her to dinner, an offer that carried implications she wasn't entirely sure how to navigate. Yet a low-grade excitement danced in her stomach each time she recalled his tentative, "Would you like to go have dinner?" "Girl, you're daydreaming again," came Marina's voice from the other side of their room divider. She stepped into view wearing mismatched pajamas and an amused grin. "You've been scrubbing that mug for like a whole minute." Abigail let out a laugh, placing the mug on a drying rack. "I'm just thinking." Marina patted closer, eyes glinting. "Does this thinking have to do with a certain wealthy do-gooder? If I recall, you mentioned something about him wanting to fix up that dance studio, right?" Abigail moved aside a bag of groceries on the tiny counter. "Yes, that was part of it," she said softly. "But also, he asked me to dinner." Even voicing it aloud felt surreal. Marina's jaw dropped. "What, like a real date?" "I guess so," Abigail said, a sheepish shrug raising her shoulders. She tried to temper the excitement flickering across her face. "We haven't set a day or time, but yeah, he brought it up." Marina's grin spread. "This is amazing. Why don't you look happier?" Abigail dried her hands on a threadbare towel, the weight of uncertainty settling. "It's just, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know if it's a date or if he's just being nice. We come from two completely different worlds. And I'm also worried about my dance focus. Callbacks, training. It's my shot at Roseland." Her voice grew quieter. "I don't want to get sidetracked." Marina reached out to squeeze Abigail's arm gently. "You're allowed a personal life, you know. Following your dream doesn't mean shutting out everything else. Besides, from what you've told me, he sounds sincere." She gave a small, encouraging smile. "Let yourself see where it goes." Abigail nodded, internal tension easing just a bit. "You're right. It's all happening so fast." Marina wriggled her eyebrows conspiratorially. "Well, if you need help picking out something to wear for this dinner, I'm your girl. You know I have a small stash of fancy clothes from my cousin who worked in fashion. Might fit you, or we can do some creative adjusting." Abigail laughed, warmth coursing through her. "I might just take you up on that," she said. "Let me see if he actually calls." She retreated to the bedroom corner, rummaging for her dance clothes in a small dresser. Today she planned a longer rehearsal at the old studio, another day with no official word from Rosalind about the callback date, but she refused to let complacency creep in. Each day was precious. She had to keep her body strong, her mind focused. Soon she was out the door, braving the drizzle in a hooded jacket. The wet city had a subdued hum, cars splashing along gutters, pedestrians quickening their steps under umbrellas. On the bus ride to the studio, Abigail studied a small notebook in which she jotted down ideas for transitions, leaps, and expressions she wanted to refine. She flipped through the pages, reading her own scrawled reminders. Extend left arm more. Sharper turn after plie. Breathe emotion into your eyes. Once she reached the studio, she found a thin plastic bag taped to the door, labeled for Abby. Inside was a new set of heavy-duty cleaning wipes and a small box of chalk to mark the floor for spacing. A neon yellow sticky note attached read, "Hope this helps, W.H." She smiled, carefully pocketing the note. Even when William wasn't there, his gestures of support were. Inside, the air smelled faintly of sawdust. Audrey's team must have come by earlier because several planks on the floor were replaced, blending seamlessly with the old wood. The mirrors in the far corner looked cleaner, newly aligned, and the wobbly bar had been reinforced with fresh brackets. She circled the space, running her hand over the updated surfaces. Gratitude swelled in her chest. How strange that a man she barely knew a few weeks ago had altered her life's landscape so profoundly. She found a note taped to the large mirror, presumably from Audrey. "Hey, dancer girl, the floor and mirror repairs are done. All safe now. Enjoy your practice. Audrey. P.S. We'll talk sound system next time." Abigail grinned. She peeled the note off the mirror and tucked it into the same pocket as William's sticky note. The sense of belonging here warmed her. Without wasting time, she peeled off her jacket, set up her phone's speakers, and started her daily warm-up. Hours slipped by in a blur of disciplined repetition. She repeated her audition combo, tested a new transition between leaps, and worked on adding more emotional texture. By the time she paused to catch her breath, the skies outside had shifted from dull gray to a brighter silver, with the drizzle letting up. A beam of watery sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that floated whenever she moved. She was in the middle of a water break when her phone buzzed on the windowsill. Swiping the screen, she saw Celeste Harrow's name in the email preview. Her stomach lurched. Quickly, she unlocked the phone and opened the message. "Miss Reyes, congratulations again on making it to callbacks. We have scheduled the final audition sessions for next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Studio 2. Please arrive warmed up and prepared for a more advanced piece focusing on contemporary fusion. Best regards, Celeste Harrow, Artistic Director, Roseland Academy." Abigail almost laughed out loud. Part relief, part elation. She reread the message twice to ensure she wasn't imagining things. Next Wednesday. She had roughly a week to refine everything. She texted back a quick acknowledgement, then sank to the floor with a surge of renewed determination. "This is it," she breathed, letting the good news wash over her. Just one more audition and I could be in. A swirl of adrenaline spurred her to get up and launch into her choreographies once again. She pressed play on the music, letting each beat flow through her limbs. This time she danced with fresh purpose, imagining Celeste's critical gaze and the hush of the final selection panel. She pictured the stage lights, the Roseanne under her feet, and the silent, reverent crowd if she made it into the Academy's upcoming season. That vision fueled her leaps, her turns, every breath. Exhausted but exhilarated, she ended her practice with a final spin, stumbling a bit on the landing. She laughed at herself, panting. "Gotta fix that," she muttered, eyeing her reflection. She decided to text William. He'd asked her to let him know if she got any news. She typed with shaky fingers. "Hey, just got the official callback date, next Wed 9 a.m. at Roseland. So excited, nervous. Thank you again for all your help. Couldn't have prepped like this without you." She sent the message, then gulped down the last of her water. A minute later, her phone pinged with a reply. "That's fantastic! I'm thrilled for you. Are you free tonight for that dinner we talked about? We can celebrate and discuss how you want to approach the next 7 days." Abigail stared at the message, heart pounding in that curious mix of excitement and nerves. Dinner, tonight? Her shift at the diner began at 6 p.m., but maybe she could adjust. She typed back, I start work at 6, off by 10. Not sure if that's too late?" Within moments, the screen lit up with William's response. "Not at all. How about I pick you up at 10:30? We can do a late dinner, if that's okay?" She found herself grinning like a fool. "Yes, that works," she replied. "Thanks." Her reflection in the mirror revealed flushed cheeks and bright eyes. She pressed her lips together, a wave of gratitude and excitement rolling through her. Then she grabbed her bag, locked up the studio, and stepped outside. The drizzle had faded to a gentle mist, and she felt as though the entire city glimmered with possibility. During her shift at the diner, Abigail buzzed with so much energy that Tanya teased her about being high on life. Orders came in, and she deftly served burgers, fries, meatloaf specials, her usual routine now tinged with a private anticipation. Every time she glimpsed the clock on the wall, her heart did a tiny leap, inching closer to 10 p.m., inching closer to the moment she could see William again, away from dusty floors and quick morning coffees, this time for a real dinner. Right before closing, Tanya handed her a small red lipstick from her purse. "Go put this on," she insisted. "I'm sure your lips are fine, but a bit of color never hurts." Abigail laughed, rolling her eyes but accepting the gift. In the cramped employee restroom, she splashed water on her face, then applied the lipstick, startled by how bold it made her feel. She pinned her hair up into a loose bun, leaving a few strands framing her face. Her reflection was a slightly glammed-up version of herself, still wearing the diner's t-shirt and jeans, but more luminous, more confident. It would have to do. She finished wiping down her section and handed in her apron right at 10 p.m. Outside, the sky was fully dark, but a line of streetlights flickered warmly. The neon diner sign buzzed overhead. She waited out front, arms folded against the night chill. The minute hand clicked to 10:30, and as if on cue, the Bentley's headlights turned the corner, casting long beams across the pavement. She inhaled a calming breath. The car rolled up, and William stepped out. He wasn't wearing a formal suit tonight. Instead, he had on a navy sweater over a crisp shirt, with dark trousers that neatly fit his tall frame. He flashed a warm smile upon seeing her. "Long day?" he asked gently, noticing her diner uniform. She nodded, stepping into the car as he held the door open. "Yeah, but I'm wired right now. I guess the excitement is kicking in?" Once they settled in, he signaled the driver to move on. "I made a reservation at a late-night bistro that's not far from here," William explained. "They serve fantastic soups, salads, and a few classic dishes. Quiet atmosphere." He paused, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. "Figured you might not want anything too fancy after a work shift." She offered a grateful smile, adjusting her seatbelt. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." The city passed by in soft blurs of neon signs and traffic lights. She noticed the stress lines in William's face seemed less pronounced tonight. He carried a gentleness that put her at ease, even as she self-consciously smoothed out her wrinkled shirt. "Sorry I'm not dressed up or anything," she murmured. He shook his head, meeting her gaze. "You look wonderful," he said simply, and her stomach flipped. They arrived at a cozy bistro tucked between a bookstore and a candle shop. From outside, Abigail glimpsed low lighting and a scattering of patrons lingering over late dinners. A waiter greeted them with mild surprise. Most customers at this hour were finishing, not arriving, but swiftly showed them to a corner table adorned with a flickering votive candle. Once seated, they both relaxed, letting the hush of the near-empty bistro envelop them. The menus featured comforting fare: tomato basil soup, roasted vegetable salad, grilled chicken plates, delicate pasta dishes. Abigail fiddled with the corner of her menu, still feeling that mixture of excitement and nervousness. The entire day had been a swirl of practice, news from Roseland, and now this, a moment that felt real and intimate. William nodded at the menu. "I'm craving something hearty. I might go for the baked salmon. What about you?" She scanned the options, deciding on a creamy mushroom pasta that looked delicious. They placed their orders, and the waiter disappeared to the kitchen, leaving them in a gentle pool of candlelight. A soft jazz tune played in the background, and the entire world seemed narrowed to just their table, their quiet conversation. "So," William began, leaning forward a bit, "Wednesday is the big day. How are you feeling?" Abigail rested her elbows on the table, chin on her hands. "Nervous, but more excited. I've practiced so much. I want to be confident. This second round will be more intense, but that's a good thing." He smiled.
"I believe in you, and if there's anything else you need, extra training with a teacher or a different set of shoes, just say the word."
The sincerity in his eyes took her breath away for a moment. "Thank you," she murmured. "Really, I might need new point shoes soon, though I'm using mostly soft ones for contemporary." She paused, inhaling. "I'll handle it. But it means a lot that you're offering." He shrugged. "It's the least I can do. I have resources that can help, and you have a talent that deserves the best chance." A flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, as though he was not used to expressing such personal convictions. She studied him, remembering the corporate aura he often exuded. "You're always juggling so many responsibilities. Is that lonely sometimes?" she ventured. He considered the question carefully, swirling the water in his glass. "Often," he admitted. "I go from meeting to meeting, big deals at stake, but at the end of the day, it's mostly about numbers. I rarely get to see the human side of things, like genuine passion and creativity. That's why I found you so refreshing, I guess. You dance like it's your entire soul out there." Warmth flared in her chest, part humility, part gratitude. Their entrees arrived, and she took the moment to gather her thoughts. They chatted over bites of pasta and salmon, learning more about each other's backgrounds, his childhood memories of traveling with his father, her teenage years spent balancing multiple part-time jobs. He laughed when she told him about Tanya's unstoppable gossip at the diner, and she teased him about his clumsy attempt at moving the bookshelf. Time moved fluidly, the hush of the bistro broken only by the soft clink of cutlery and murmured conversations at the few remaining occupied tables. Before they knew it, the waiter discreetly asked if they'd like anything else. William ordered a small dessert, chocolate mousse, to share, ignoring Abigail's mild protest that she was already too full. "This is a celebration," he said, half grinning. "We have to toast your call back." They sampled the mousse, laughter drifting between them over silly anecdotes. Abigail marveled at how easily they were building a bridge between their very different worlds. She no longer felt the stiff unease she'd initially feared. Instead, she felt the quiet thrill of genuine connection forming. All too soon, the clock ticked past midnight. The bistro staff politely began clearing the final tables and dimming some lights. William requested the bill, adding a generous tip. After they stepped outside, the chill of the late-night air made Abigail shiver slightly, and he slipped off his light jacket, placing it gently around her shoulders. "You'll be cold," she protested softly, but he simply shook his head with a warm smile. The Bentley rolled up moments later, and they climbed in, heading back to her apartment. The city at night whirred by, neon signs and shuttered shops. She gazed at the passing lights, her head still buzzing with the evening's conversation, with the swirl of affection she felt building in her heart. When they finally reached her street, William stepped out first to open the door. Standing on the quiet sidewalk, she faced him, hugging his jacket around herself. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight. It was really nice." He moved a fraction closer, the lamp overhead illuminating the faint worry lines at his brow. "I'm glad," he murmured. I'd like to do it again sometime if—" She cut him off with a nod, smiling. "Yes, I'd like that too." In the hush of the moment, he leaned in slightly as if debating a kiss, but then paused, perhaps second-guessing. Abigail sensed his hesitation and felt her own heart flutter. Instead, they exchanged a gentle, lingering hug that spoke volumes. Her cheek brushed against his shoulder, and she felt the steady rise and fall of his breath. "Good night, Abigail," he said softly when they pulled apart. "Good night," she whispered, stepping back. She relinquished his jacket and handed it back with a small grin. Then she turned to walk upstairs, every step resonating with a quiet euphoria. She let herself into her apartment and found Marina pretending to be asleep on the couch, though her eyes popped open the moment Abigail closed the door. "So?" Marina inquired in a playful whisper. Abigail just grinned, cheeks glowing. "We had dinner," she said simply. She dropped onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow, and it was perfect. Marina whooped under her breath, tossing a pillow in mock celebration. "That's my girl!" They giggled quietly, mindful of the neighbors, then parted for bed. Abigail slipped under the blankets, mind spinning with images of William's gentle smile, the bistro's candlelit ambiance, and the now vivid hope for her upcoming audition. Drifting off, she contemplated how unexpectedly life could pivot. One moment, she was dancing alone in a cramped living room, uncertain if her dream would ever come true. The next, she was on the verge of a major break, buoyed by someone who believed in her more than she ever thought possible. And in that quiet hush of midnight, her heart soared at the recognition that sometimes meeting the right person at the right time could transform everything, both on and off the dance floor. Abigail's remaining days before the Roseland callback vanished in a blur of rehearsals, diner shifts, and heart-tingling moments with William. Every morning she woke early, stretching in the small space beside her bed before catching a bus to the refurbished studio. There she practiced for hours, testing variations, perfecting transitions, striving for fluidity in each move. When exhaustion set in, she reminded herself of the stakes. This was the opportunity she'd fought for since she was a child, and she refused to let it slip through her fingers. William, meanwhile, balanced his corporate obligations with an increasing presence in her world. He would sometimes drop by the studio unannounced, often carrying a bag of fresh pastries or a thermos of tea, small surprises that warmed her heart. He'd watch her dance, ask questions about her progress, and beam with a quiet pride whenever she nailed a tricky sequence. On more than one occasion, he even got his hands dusty again, helping move boxes left behind by Audrey's team. One afternoon, he arrived with a bouquet of simple white daisies. Abigail, caught mid-leap, nearly stumbled when she spotted them in his hand. She laughed breathlessly, setting down to greet him. "What are those for?" she asked, cheeks flushed from both dancing and surprise. He shrugged in a self-conscious way. "I saw a flower stand on the way here, and they reminded me of you. Bright, understated, real." He handed them over, gaze earnest. "I just wanted to wish you luck for your final callback prep." She pressed the daisies to her nose, inhaling their mild fragrance. "They're perfect," she whispered. She felt a flicker of emotion pass between them, appreciation, admiration, something deeper unspoken. Their time together wasn't all romantic flutter, though. Sometimes he'd have to rush off to a meeting or answer a barrage of urgent emails, apologizing to her for the interruptions. And she continued to work her shifts, grateful for every tip, still aware that she needed a financial cushion, no matter how generous William's gestures seemed. A part of her refused to become fully dependent on his wealth. She was determined to stand on her own 2 feet. 2 days before the callback, Celeste Harrow herself dropped in on Abigail's final open practice hour. Abigail had no warning. She was in the midst of trying out an emotionally intense section of her choreography, and as she spun to a stop, there stood Celeste in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. "Miss Reyes," Celeste said by way of greeting. She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the studio. The dryness in her tone made it impossible to tell if she approved or not. "I've heard you found a private place to rehearse." Abigail quickly grabbed a towel to dab at her perspiring forehead. Yes, she answered, trying not to sound nervous. I'm very fortunate. A friend let me use this space. Celeste nodded. Good. I came to see how you're progressing, but also to remind you that the callback will demand more than technique. We're selecting dancers who can tell a story on stage, connect with the audience. Understood? Abigail swallowed, recalling how Celeste seemed to embody both steel and grace. Yes, ma'am. For this final phase, we'll also be testing partnering skills, Celeste added. There will be a moment you'll have to improvise with another dancer. A flicker of alarm flashed through Abigail. She hadn't practiced partnering much at all, let alone improvised contact work. She felt her heart pick up speed. I'll be ready, she said, determination firming her voice. Celeste studied her with a cool eye, then shifted her attention to the mirrors, the bar, the general environment. Well, I hope so, she murmured. Your movement shows potential, but potential alone doesn't guarantee a contract. Stay focused. Then, as abruptly as she'd come, Celeste turned and exited, her footsteps echoing through the hallway. Abigail stood there, trying to still the sudden quake of anxiety in her chest. Partnering? Improv? She'd known Rosalind demanded versatility, but she hadn't anticipated this so close to the audition day. A moment later, William poked his head in from the corridor, face showing concern. I passed a woman on my way in. Stern expression, black turtleneck. She didn't say a word to me, just walked out. Was that Celeste Harrow? Abigail managed a shaky laugh. Yes, she dropped by unannounced. She gave you bad news? Not exactly, but I just learned I'll have to do a partnering improv, Abigail confessed, pacing. I've done it before, but never in front of such a high-stakes panel. My stomach's in knots. William crossed the room, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You'll figure it out, he said gently. Is there a friend or fellow dancer you can call on to practice some lifts or sequences? She thought of her community center days, but most of those dancers had scattered. The only partner training she'd done was amateur level. I'm not sure, she admitted, shoulders slumping. William's gaze flicked around as though searching for a solution. What if we find you a dance partner on short notice? A teacher or a performer around here? Someone we can hire for a day or two to help you prep? Abigail blinked, her mind racing. That could work, she said slowly, though she hated the idea of more expenses, especially for something so last minute. But given the stakes, it might be the only way. William's phone was out before she even finished speaking. Let me call Audrey, he said. She's well connected in the arts scene. She might know someone who can come in and do a couple of crash course sessions with you. Abigail watched, half relieved, half anxious, as he made the call. Audrey's energetic voice was audible even from a step away, exclaiming that she indeed knew a dancer. Actually, an ex-colleague from a local dance troupe, now freelancing. In a whirlwind of arrangements, Audrey had the man's number, and William swiftly booked him for the next afternoon. By the time William hung up, Abigail felt both gratitude and guilt. She glanced up at him, eyes shining with relief and worry all at once. I can't keep letting you pay for everything, she murmured. I barely even know the going rate for a freelance partner. He shook his head. Don't worry about that right now. Focus on what you need for the audition. His voice was gentle, eyes filled with reassurance. Once you're a star at Roseland, you can treat me to front-row tickets, okay? A smile tremored across her lips. She let herself lean into the wave of support he offered, though the weight of owing him, in every sense, still coiled in her mind. Deal, she whispered. The next afternoon, the freelance dancer arrived, a tall, muscular man named Mason, with an easygoing confidence and an open smile. Audrey says you need a partner for contemporary contact work, he said by way of introduction. I've done a lot of that. Let's get rolling. Mason and Abigail hit it off immediately in terms of dance chemistry. He was patient yet skilled, demonstrating lifts and guiding her through improvisational phrases that demanded trust and timing. They practiced transitions in close hold, exploring weight shifts and momentum. William, who stayed to watch part of the session, was visibly impressed. He sat quietly near the mirrors, occasionally offering a thumbs up whenever Abigail nailed a tricky lift or turn. She tried to ignore her self-consciousness about William witnessing the intimate nature of contact dance, how her hands and body had to move fluidly with Mason's. But William seemed entirely supportive, no trace of jealousy or discomfort. During a water break, Mason grinned at Abigail. "You're good at following," he noted, toweling off his forehead. "But remember, improv is about dialogue, not just one person leading. Don't be afraid to initiate a shift or a lift if you feel the impulse. Trust the dance." She nodded, rolling her shoulders to ease the tension building there. "Right, dialogue, not monologue." They resumed, music drifting from her phone speakers, soft beats that pulsed like a heartbeat in the airy studio. Every time Abigail relaxed into the flow, she felt a sliver of confidence grow. Partnering might have been her weak spot, but Mason's guidance and William's encouraging presence gave her courage to push through the fear of messing up. By evening, her arms shook with fatigue, her mind drenched in new information. Mason offered a final handshake. "You're going to do great, Abby," he said. "Hit me up if you ever want more training, and good luck at Roseland." She thanked him profusely, feeling the prickle of tears at the corners of her eyes. The generosity of strangers, of William, Audrey, Mason, stirred a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. Once Mason left, she sank onto the floor, too drained to move. William approached, a plastic bag in hand. "Got takeout," he said, passing her a container that smelled of stir-fried noodles and vegetables. "Figured you'd need fuel." Her stomach growled on cue. She accepted the food, devouring several bites in comfortable silence. Then she glanced up at him, lids heavy with exhaustion. "Thank you," she murmured, not just referring to the noodles but everything he'd done. "You keep saving me." He settled beside her, legs stretched out on the wood floor, his shoulder nearly touching hers. "I'm not saving you," he said in a low tone. "You're doing all the hard work. I'm just helping." She nodded, heart warming. The evening light in the studio stretched their shadows across the floor. She sipped from a water bottle, letting her body relax in this safe bubble they'd somehow built together. A quiet descended, the kind of pause that felt intimate, not awkward. William studied her face, brow lined with quiet thought. "How do you feel about everything now?" he asked softly. She swallowed. "Better," she admitted. "Still nervous, but I have a plan. I know what to expect, mostly, and that helps." He smiled. "You'll conquer it, Abigail." Then his expression turned more serious, almost contemplative. "And after you do, after you get that spot at Roseland, what's next for you?" She hesitated, the question having always floated on the edges of her mind. "Well, the Academy's program is a big deal," she began. "I'd train, perform in a few shows, maybe earn a modest stipend. Longer term, if they keep me for the season, I could tour with them, or branch into other companies. The dream is to dance professionally enough to make a living. Travel, see the world if I can." He nodded, clearly fascinated. "What about your personal life?" he asked, voice a notch softer. "Friends, love, home. Do you see yourself always in this city, or—" Her cheeks warmed at the question's intimacy. She exhaled, glancing down at the takeout container in her lap. "I don't really know. If I'm honest, I've never had the luxury of planning much beyond survival and chasing opportunities. But lately—" She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. "I guess I'm discovering there might be more for me than just dancing alone." Their shared look filled the room with a gentle charge, a wordless acknowledgement that in this short span they'd forged a connection that defied the usual caution of new acquaintances. Her heart thudded with the realization that she wanted that connection to deepen, even as her dance dreams remained her foremost focus. William's phone buzzed, shattering the quiet moment. He grimaced an apology, reading the screen. "I have a late conference call in 20 minutes, he explained, sighing. "Board members in a different time zone. I should go." She forced a light laugh. The life of a CEO. He stood, offering her a hand to pull her up. She accepted, rising on unsteady legs. She wobbled slightly, and he steadied her waist, their faces inches apart. Her breath caught, warmth flickering between them. It was as if the entire studio had gone silent, watching them in anticipation. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. She thought she might want him to. But then the phone buzzed again, jolting them back to reality. He released her gently, a soft exhale escaping both of them. "I'll see you soon," he said, voice a little husky. Then he flashed that signature gentle smile. "2 more days until your audition. I'll be rooting for you." She mustered a small nod, heart pounding. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much it means." He grabbed his coat and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back, tossing one more grin her way. Then he was gone, the door's echo lingering in the studio's hush. Abigail closed her eyes, trying to process the swirl of emotions left in his wake. Part of her wanted to fling caution to the wind and embrace whatever was growing between them. Another part reminded her, focus, call back, keep your composure. The memory of Celeste's stern warning rang in her ears. Potential alone doesn't guarantee a contract. Sighing, she returned to her phone, played the music once more, and began a final round of gentle drills. Sweat beaded anew on her forehead, her muscles groaning from the day's exertion, but she pushed on. She needed to be ready. Everything else, her stirring bond with William, the flutter of attraction, would have to wait until after she gave her all on that audition floor. In the quiet of the studio, she closed her eyes and danced, envisioning the judges' panel, the stage lights, the leap of her heart when she finally, hopefully, heard the words, "Welcome to Roseland." The day before the callback arrived in a flurry of last-minute preparations and a storm of nerves that Abigail couldn't quite shake. She'd spent the early morning going through slow, meditative stretches, allowing her body a measure of rest after days of intense training, then finished the afternoon reviewing her improvisational work with Mason. By now, they'd formed a comfortable groove together, discovering which lifts flowed smoothly and which transitions required extra care. "You've got this," Mason reassured her when their session ended. "If they make you partner, you'll adapt just fine. The important thing is to stay relaxed and aware of your partner's energy." Abigail repeated that mantra to herself for the rest of the day. Around dinner time, she found herself at her cramped apartment, rummaging through her belongings. She was determined to pick the perfect audition outfit. Black leggings that offered freedom of movement, a fitted but simple leotard layered with a sheer wrap skirt. Now that she had a little spare tip money, she'd bought brand-new soft shoes. Her old ones were near splitting at the seams. Marina hovered in the doorway, arms folded. "All set for tomorrow?" she asked, a proud tilt to her head. "I think so," Abigail sighed, hunching over her bed where she'd laid out the outfit. "It's weird. My body feels ready, but my mind is bouncing between excitement and pure terror." Marina came over, gently pulling Abigail upright. "Girl, you're about to walk into Roseland and show them who you are. They're going to love it." She eyed her critically. "Though you might want to get some real sleep tonight instead of pacing around rehearsing mentally." Abigail managed a dry laugh. Easier said than done. Marina grinned, returning to the living area. "I'll make some chamomile tea. That might help. And remember, you have that new dance space for a reason. Your hours of practice will pay off." As if on cue, Abigail's phone buzzed. William. A little jolt shot through her, not just from the audition nerves but also the warmth that always accompanied his messages. She picked up. How are you holding up? Big day tomorrow. Let me know if you need anything." She typed back quickly, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm okay. Nervous, but ready. Gonna get an early night. Thanks for checking in." His response came almost immediately. "You'll be incredible. I'm rooting for you. Sleep well, dancer." That last phrase, dancer, made her heart flutter in ways she wasn't entirely used to. Dancer. She'd been chasing that identity for so long. Tomorrow, she'd either step into a new realm or face the heartbreak of rejection. She exhaled, setting her phone aside. She refused to let fear dominate her mind. The alarm blared at dawn and she jolted awake. A dull ache curled in her stomach. Part hunger, part nerves. She took a quick shower, tied her hair into a secure bun, and triple-checked her dance bag for everything. Shoes, water, a small towel, spare bobby pins. On a whim, she slipped one of the small white daisies William had given her, now dried and pressed into a side pocket as a secret talisman of hope. Marina was already in the kitchen, frying eggs. She insisted on feeding Abigail a decent breakfast. "You won't dance well if you're faint from hunger," she chided. "Eat, please." Abigail obeyed, though her appetite was thin. They barely spoke, the quiet tension of the morning heavy in the apartment. Before long, she hugged Marina goodbye, shouldered her bag, and slipped outside into the crisp air. Dawn was just breaking, painting the sky in delicate pink and orange hues. She took it as a good omen. The bus ride to Roseland felt interminable. Every red light triggered a fresh wave of anxiety. She tried to distract herself by listening to calm music on her headphones, but each time the bus lurched, her mind flashed to thoughts of the panel of judges, Celeste's evaluating gaze, and the possibility of messing up her partnered improv. At last, she stood in front of the imposing glass facade of Roseland Academy. A handful of other dancers waited by the entrance, exchanging tense greetings. Some she recognized from the first round, others appeared new, likely direct invites from other auditions. Clutching her bag, Abigail inhaled deeply, summoning the hours of sweat-drenched practice she'd poured into this dream. Inside, a staff member ticked off names against a list, directing them to Studio 2. "You have about half an hour to warm up," the staffer informed. "We'll start promptly at 9. Studio 2 was slightly smaller than the one used in the first round, but no less intimidating. Mirrors lined two walls, and tall windows let in a flood of natural light. Dancers peeled off layers of sweats, revealing toned limbs and taut nerves. Abigail joined them, heading to a corner to begin her warm-up routine. She glimpsed Celeste Harrow near the far wall, conferring with two other choreographers she didn't recognize. Her stomach twisted. Keep breathing. Keep focusing. She settled on the floor, gently stretching her hamstrings, rolling her ankles, tuning out the murmurs around her. She visualized her choreographies, pictured herself executing each leap, turn, and emotional nuance flawlessly. Eventually, Celeste clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, gather up." The room hushed. "Welcome to our final callback. Today we'll see your solo contemporary pieces, plus a short partnering improvisation. Then we may ask some of you to attempt a repertoire excerpt from our upcoming production. Understood?" A chorus of nods answered her. Celeste's eyes flicked over the group. "We'll proceed in groups of 5. When you're not performing, please wait quietly in the hallway or along the edges. First group, numbers 1 through 5. Second group, 6 to 10, and so on." Abigail checked her assigned number. 10. That placed her in the second group. She watched as the first 5 stepped forward, hearts in their throats. Music began, and each dancer performed a short piece they'd prepared. Some were breathtaking, with crisp lines and enthralling presence. Others displayed obvious nerves, stumbling on transitions. Celeste and her associates scribbled notes, their faces mask-like. At last, it was time for Group 2. Abigail's legs felt jittery as she stepped up. The staffer announced each dancer's name, and they moved to individual corners of the studio to perform their solos one at a time. By the time the dancer before her finished, Abigail's pulse pounded in her ears. "This is it," she told herself. "All that practice. Show them who you are." She handed the staffer her music file. The overhead speakers clicked, and the opening notes spilled out. She took her position, knees slightly bent, arms lifted in a poised curve. Then, with the first beat, she launched into her routine. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating to perform here, in front of Celeste and other watchers. Yet as the music swelled, she channeled everything she had. The hours in the deserted studio, Mason's instructions, William's unwavering encouragement, they all surged through her movements. She poured emotion into each spiral, extended her lines with fierce clarity. A fleeting image of dancing alone in her childhood living room flickered through her mind, reminding her of how far she'd come. A minute and a half passed in a heartbeat, the final note prompting a dramatic, controlled descent to the floor. Her chest heaved, muscles vibrating with adrenaline. She could barely remember each detail of what she'd done. She only hoped it looked as powerful as it felt. From the panel's table, Celeste and the others jotted notes. There was no immediate applause, this was an audition after all, but Celeste's gaze held steady on Abigail a second longer than expected. Something flickered in the director's eyes. Recognition, perhaps? Approval? Then she gestured for the next dancer to step forward. Abigail retreated to the side, heart racing. She dared not let herself celebrate yet. Partnering was still to come. After the solo rounds for all groups finished, Celeste called them back in. "Good work, everyone. Now, for the partnering improv. We'll pair you up randomly, give you 2 minutes to explore a contemporary contact piece. We'll watch carefully for chemistry, adaptability, and your capacity to communicate through motion. Understood?" A staff member read out pairings. Some dancers stiffened with dismay, others exhaled in relief if they recognized their partner. Abigail listened intently, half praying she'd get someone who knew at least a bit of contact technique. Number 10, Abigail Reyes with number 21, Darius Ngoma. She searched the room, spotting a tall, lean man with an angular face and long arms. He gave her a quick nod, stepping forward to join her. They only had a few seconds to speak softly before the music started. "Ever done contact improv?" she asked, voice hushed. "Some," Darius replied. "Let's stay fluid. I'll initiate a lift if it feels right, okay?" She nodded, her entire body humming with tension. Then the music began, a mellow, pulsing track with an atmospheric feel. She raised her arms, letting herself feel Darius's presence. He circled around her, they locked eyes, and the dance commenced. At first, it felt awkward. He was a stranger, and she had only fleeting signals to read, but she conjured Mason's advice. Dialogue, not monologue. She softened her stance, opening her senses to Darius's cues. He gently grasped her waist, guiding her into a slow spiral. She reciprocated by initiating a subtle lift of her leg, and he mirrored it with a pivot. Gradually, they found a rhythm. His lifts were confident, but not overbearing. She leaned into him, letting her weight shift, then extended her arms in a sweeping arc. They traded momentum in a swirl of fleeting touches, a hand on a shoulder, a sliding arm across a back, a spin that ended with her pressed lightly against his chest. An electric hush fell over the room. The music continued for another measure, and in a final improvisational flourish, Darius scooped her up in a gentle lift. She let her arms drift out, breath catching. When the track ended, they paused in a mutual lunge, hearts pounding in tandem. She stepped away, meeting his eyes with a tremulous smile. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, equally breathless. Then they both turned to face the panel, which was scribbling notes again. Celeste's gaze was hard to read, but she didn't appear disappointed. Abigail counted that as a victory. The rest of the pairings went in a blur. Some crashed into each other, some soared with refined synergy. As the last duo finished, Celeste stood. "We'll take a short break. Then those we wish to see in the repertoire excerpt will be called back into Studio 2. The rest, thank you for your time and dedication." That meant there was another cut happening right now. Abigail's mind buzzed, anxious. She stepped into the hallway where the dancers milled, tension thick in the air. She sank against a wall, sipping water, trying to quell the swirl of doubts. Darius approached, offering a friendly pat on her shoulder. "You did great," he said. "I really felt your energy out there." She gave a grateful smile. "You too," she replied. "Whatever happens, that was awesome." A few minutes later, a staffer emerged with a printout. "These numbers, please return. 4, 7, 10. Abigail's chest clenched, waiting. 14, 21, 25, 33, and 38. Her heart soared. 10 was on the list. She caught Darius's excited grin. 21 was there too. They re-entered Studio 2, an odd mixture of relief and new nerves. "Congratulations on making it this far," Celeste declared once they'd assembled. "We're going to teach you a short excerpt from our next production's contemporary ballet piece. You'll have half an hour to learn it, then perform in small groups. Pay attention, move quickly, show me you can handle a professional setting." The choreographer beside Celeste stepped forward and launched into a crisp demonstration of the excerpt. Abigail felt both dread and exhilaration. It was complex, with tricky timing, a blend of classical footwork and sharp, modern angles. She forced her mind to record every detail, heart thumping as she tried each sequence with the group. 30 minutes had never passed so quickly. By the time Celeste clapped to signal the end of rehearsal, Abigail's brain was rattling with corrections and half-remembered steps. She used the final minute to forcibly calm herself. She'd gotten this far. She could handle one more test. "Groups of 4, Celeste ordered. Numbers 4, 7, 10, and 21 first. That meant she was up again, along with Darius and 2 other dancers. They took their positions, the music started, and they dove into the excerpt. Errors nipped at Abigail's periphery, but she clung to her training. Head up, shoulders back, refine each movement. She glimpsed Celeste's critical gaze locked on them, felt the sweat trickle down her spine, heard her own breath surge with each leap. Somehow they reached the end without a major catastrophe, and as she bowed her head in a final pose, she sensed that intangible electricity in her limbs. Maybe she'd done well. Maybe this was enough. They stepped aside, letting the next group on. The wait afterward was excruciating. Finally, Celeste and her colleagues stood to address them. "Thank you. We will contact you all with our final decisions within 48 hours. That is all for today. No immediate results, no celebratory flourish, no crestfallen rejections. Just a swirl of dancers gathering their bags, exchanging hushed well-wishes or resigned sighs." Abigail took a shaky breath, alone in her corner, letting the wave of exhaustion and relief wash over her. She'd given everything. Now she could only wait. Darius passed by, offering a supportive fist bump. She returned it, feeling a flicker of kinship. And then she left Studio 2, the halls of Roseland oddly quiet now that the day's drama was over. She stepped into the brisk outdoors, blinking against the midday sun. Her phone buzzed, a message from William. "Thinking of you. How did it go?" She typed back, still breathless from adrenaline. "It's done. No immediate results. They'll let us know in 48 hours. I'm wiped, but relieved." His reply made her smile through her exhaustion. "Proud of you. Want me to pick you up, or do you need space to breathe?" She considered it. Yes, she wanted to see him, to share her swirl of emotions. So she answered, "I could use a ride if you're free. Thanks." He responded within seconds. "On my way." She lowered the phone, heart thudding from a new, gentler excitement. In the wake of the audition's intensity, the thought of William's reassuring presence felt like a gift. Within her, hope warred with exhaustion, but a sense of profound satisfaction took hold. She'd done it, leaped into the unknown with all she had. Now the next chapter lay in Rosalind's hands. Abigail stepped out of Roseland Academy's tall glass doors, letting out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The entire morning had been a roller coaster of emotion, the kind that left her legs trembling with relief, excitement, and an odd emptiness now that it was over. She stood on the steps, scanning the street for William's Bentley, still dressed in her black leggings and fitted leotard under a light jacket. Cold air nipped at her exposed ankles, but she was too keyed up to care. She spotted the car gliding around the corner soon enough. Its polished exterior reflected the midday sun. The driver slowed at the curb and William emerged from the back seat. He was wearing a casual blazer and jeans, looking polished yet relaxed. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "How are you?" he asked, moving closer, his voice low with concern. She could see the tension in his own shoulders, as if he'd been waiting too. She offered a wavering smile. "Exhausted. Relieved. They won't announce anything for 48 hours, so all I can do is wait." William opened the car door and she slipped into the back seat. She felt the plush cushions cradling her aching muscles, the hush of the Bentley's interior easing her frantic mind. He followed her inside and they pulled away from Rosalind's curb. "Let's find somewhere you can decompress," he said, tapping his phone to send a note to the driver. "I thought maybe we could grab lunch and talk, unless you want quiet time?" She glanced at him, touched by the sincerity in his gaze. "Lunch sounds nice," she admitted. "I could use a distraction." They ended up at a small cafe overlooking a modest park, a relaxed, sunlit spot where they could snag an outdoor table. The day had blossomed into mild warmth, and it soothed Abigail's frazzled nerves to be surrounded by tree-dotted greenery. She ordered a comforting bowl of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. William went for a light pasta dish. While they waited, William reached across the table to rest his hand lightly on hers. "Tell me about it," he said. "What happened in there?" She exhaled, letting the tension roll off her shoulders. "It was intense," she confessed. "I did my solo, then an improvised partnering session, and finally learned a short excerpt from their next production. They tested us on everything: technique, emotional expression, ability to work with a partner on the fly." A tremor of tired laughter escaped her. "They said we'd know in 2 days, which feels like an eternity." William's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles. "It sounds like you rose to the challenge. I'm proud of you." Those words, so simple, sent a pulse of warmth through her. She realized how much she'd yearned for someone to say that, to acknowledge her hard work, her sacrifice. Her heart and soul poured into dance. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you. For everything, really. I don't think I could have reached this point without your help, or at least, not this confidently." He shook his head in mild protest. "You had all this talent before I showed up," he said with a small grin. "But I'm glad I could support you in some way." Their food arrived, and they slipped into comfortable conversation. Abigail recounted the other dancers' skill levels, her impressions of Celeste's demeanor, and the momentary camaraderie she'd felt with her improvised partner. William, for his part, listened intently, occasionally voicing quiet admiration or asking clarifying questions. He never seemed bored, never checked his phone. He was fully present, which allowed her to unpack the swirl of adrenaline and relief lodged in her chest. As they finished their meal, the conversation took a softer turn. William stirred his iced tea thoughtfully. "If you get in," he began, "this will change your day-to-day life. Long rehearsals, potential tours, maybe even out-of-town performances. Are you ready for that?" She searched his eyes, recognizing the undercurrent in his question. "How will this affect us?" She reached for her water glass, letting a moment pass before she answered. "I want that life," she admitted. "I've always wanted it. But I also want to keep the people I care about in my world, no matter how hectic it gets." He nodded, exhaling as if relieved. "Good," he said, "because I have a feeling you're about to get very busy, and I'll be happy just to see you whenever you can spare the time. If If you want that." Her heartbeat kicked up at the openness in his voice. "I do want that," she murmured, careful but firm. Their gazes locked, a silent understanding that whatever formed between them wasn't a fling or a passing curiosity. It was something real, fragile, and new. They lingered a little longer, sipping the last of their drinks, letting the tension of the day subside. A gentle breeze rustled the trees in the nearby park, and the sun's rays warmed their table. For a moment, it felt as if the rest of the city had paused, granting them a pocket of time to savor each other's company. Eventually, William checked his watch. "I have a meeting in a couple of hours," he said with a regretful sigh. "Another set of negotiations. But if you'd like, I can drop you off at home, or anywhere else you prefer." Abigail considered how her body throbbed with exhaustion. A hot shower and a nap sounded like heaven. "Home, please," she decided, standing from the table. "I think I need rest, and to keep my phone nearby for the next 2 days in case Rosalind emails early." He settled the bill, waved goodbye to the cafe staff, and walked with her back to the Bentley. The midday brightness had intensified, and a few passers-by glanced at them, a poised young woman in dance attire, a tall man in a tailored blazer. She wondered if people ever looked at them and questioned how such different worlds could intersect. The thought made her smile inwardly. If only they knew how kindness and passion could bridge gaps that seemed insurmountable. The ride to her apartment was quiet, each of them lost in private reflections. She laced her fingers in her lap, noticing the slight tremble that still lingered in her muscles. William occasionally glanced her way, offering an encouraging smile. When the car finally pulled up to her block, he insisted on getting out, helping her with the door. Standing on the sidewalk, he gently brushed a stray hair off her face, his expression full of care. "Rest well. Don't worry yourself sick waiting." She nodded, feeling unsteady under the weight of her emotions. It struck her just how normal this had begun to feel, having him near, looking out for her. "I'll try," she said lightly, forcing a small grin. "But no promises. My brain loves to obsess." He leaned in, and a faint current of anticipation passed between them. This time he didn't hesitate. He pressed a soft, warm kiss to her forehead, a gesture that felt oddly intimate, more tender than anything else. Her breath caught, eyes fluttering closed for a fleeting second. "Text me tonight?" he asked quietly when he drew back. She nodded again, heart quivering. "Okay." With that, she climbed the short steps to her apartment, glancing over her shoulder just once. He offered a gentle wave, then slipped back into the Bentley. The car eased away, leaving her with a buzzing sense of contentment and the faint imprint of his affection on her brow. The next 2 days blurred into a restless vigil. Abigail tried to stay busy. She worked her evening shifts at the diner, tidied the apartment, even revisited the studio briefly to stretch out her post-audition aches. Every ping or buzz on her phone set her nerves on edge, only to find out it was a spam message or a friend asking how the callback went. She and William texted frequently, little updates and shared jokes. He sent her a photo of a new hotel lounge he was renovating, asking her opinion on color schemes. She replied with a candid shot of her bedroom-turned-mini practice space, joking that the color scheme was more clutter-chic. Marina teased her about how often her phone chimed. "You're so smitten," she declared one night while they prepared dinner. Abigail tossed a wadded napkin at her friend. "It's not just romance," she insisted, failing to hide her blush. "He's become a real friend, a big part of this dream." Marina snickered. Sure. You just keep messaging your friend." That second day dawned and the 48-hour mark loomed. Abigail's stomach stayed in knots. By late morning, she felt so on edge that she nearly jumped when the mail slot clacked. She found only bills and a flyer. By afternoon, she was pacing. Finally, around 3 p.m., she decided to burn off the anxiety by heading to the studio, rummaging for any leftover tasks or extra practice she could do. On the walk, her phone buzzed. She froze in place, nearly fumbling it in her haste. The screen showed an email notification from Roseland Academy. Her heart slammed into her ribs. With trembling fingers, she opened the email. "Dear Miss Reyes, thank you for attending our recent callback auditions. We appreciate the effort and talent each dancer brought to the process. After careful consideration, we are delighted to offer you a contract with the Roseland Academy's upcoming season. Enclosed are details of rehearsal schedules, stipend information, and performance dates. We look forward to your contribution to our production. Warm regards, Celeste Harrow, Artistic Director, Roseland Academy." Abigail's vision blurred with tears of astonishment. She reread the words, "We are delighted to offer you a contract." She actually let out a small, disbelieving laugh in the middle of the sidewalk. Passers-by shot curious glances, but she couldn't care less. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back a joyous cry. This was it, her dream, the reality she'd chased for so long. Her first instinct was to call William. She hit his number, heart pounding. His phone rang twice before his voice sounded. "Abigail? Everything okay?" She could hardly contain the glee in her voice. "I got in," she gasped. "Roseland just emailed. I'm in. I'm part of their next season." She heard the astonished pause, then a burst of genuine elation. "You did it!" he exclaimed, tone bright with excitement. "Abigail, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." He let out a delighted laugh that warmed her heart. "Where are you right now?" "On the street," she answered, almost giddy. "I was heading to the studio, but I just stopped in my tracks when I read the email." He barely hesitated. "Stay there, I'll come get you. We need to celebrate properly." She blinked, tears still clinging to her lashes. "Are you sure? You're not in a meeting?" He scoffed, voice gentle yet firm. "They can wait. This is too important. Text me your location. I'll be there as soon as I can." Smiling, she ended the call, her body trembling with the adrenaline of success. She typed out her location, then found a bench nearby to sit on. She needed a moment to steady her breathing, to process the news. She was an official member of Roseland's new season. They'd pay her, train her, put her on stage for the city, and maybe beyond. Every long shift at the diner, every cramped living room rehearsal, every uncertain step had led to this triumph. Not 10 minutes later, William's car pulled up with a soft purr of the engine. He stepped out, scanning the sidewalk. As soon as he spotted her, he moved with purposeful strides. She rose from the bench, meeting him halfway. She tried to speak, but emotions clogged her throat. So instead, she just grinned, tears shining in her eyes. He grinned back, wrapping her in a warm, triumphant hug. That wordless moment felt like a shared victory. All the tension from the last few weeks evaporated into a joyous, tangible relief. "You did it," he whispered near her ear, arms still holding her securely. "I knew you would." She clutched the back of his blazer, letting tears slip onto her cheeks. "I'm so thankful," she managed, her voice choked. "You helped make this possible." He shook his head, pulling back just enough to meet her gaze. "You made it possible," he countered, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "I just wanted to see you shine." They stood there for another heartbeat, sharing the sweetness of the moment. Then William cleared his throat, a playful glint in his eyes. "Ready to celebrate? I'm thinking we should do something fun, something that'll really mark this occasion." Her face lit with curiosity. "Like what?" A grin spread across his lips. "How about we start with a nice dinner, a real celebration dinner, not just a quick bite, and then we'll figure out something else. Maybe a walk around the city or a scenic drive, something to toast to your new chapter." Her heart danced. "That sounds perfect," she whispered. The driver, who'd discreetly waited, came around to open the Bentley's door. Abigail slipped inside, her mind still spinning with excitement. As William settled next to her, she let out a shaky laugh. "I keep expecting to wake up from this dream." He reached over, covering her hand with his. "If you're dreaming, then so am I," he said quietly, sincerity glowing in his eyes. "Because meeting you, watching you grow and succeed, none of it feels quite real. And yet, here we are." A wave of emotion welled in her chest. She gently turned her palm under his, lacing their fingers together. "It's real," she affirmed softly. "And I'm so glad." They shared a look that conveyed everything words couldn't: gratitude, admiration, the beginnings of a deeper bond. The car began to move, city lights rolling by, the bustling world around them a mere backdrop to the joy igniting their hearts. As they cruised onward, Abigail took a final glimpse at her phone, rereading the email's opening line, "We are delighted to offer you a contract," and felt a rush of fresh tears threaten again. Tomorrow she would contact Rosalind, sign the paperwork, learn the details of her schedule. Tonight she would celebrate a dream finally in her grasp, buoyed by the warmth of William's unwavering support. For the first time in her life, she believed wholeheartedly in the future, both on stage and off, and she silently vowed never to forget the girl who once danced alone, forging this path to the shining moment she now held in trembling, victorious hands. A crisp wind swept across the city streets that afternoon, rustling the last of the autumn leaves. Abigail stood backstage at Rosalind's grand auditorium, muscles alert with a familiar tension. Lights glowed softly behind the velvet curtains, and beyond them, a murmuring crowd settled in their seats. In the weeks since she'd signed her contract, life had shifted into overdrive. Daily rehearsals from dawn till dusk, costume fittings, production meetings. The moment she'd dreamed of was here, her first official performance with the Academy. She glanced down at her costume, a sleek, modern design in black and gold, hugging her body but allowing movement. Matching dancers surrounded her, some with more experience, others equally new. They'd bonded in the crucible of rehearsals, forging supportive friendships. Celeste Harrow had been at the helm the entire time, stern as ever, yet oddly protective once you proved your mettle. Abigail adjusted the gold filigree design running across her shoulder, recalling how surreal it had felt the first day she stepped into the same Roseland studios not as an auditioner, but as a contracted member. Celeste had acknowledged her with a curt nod, then welcomed her as Miss Reyes, part of the ensemble. From that point forward, Abigail had poured every ounce of energy into preparing for the show. Somewhere in the darkness off stage, the orchestra tuned up, their notes drifting into the backstage area. The routine they were about to perform was a contemporary ballet piece that fused classical lines with modern invention. Abigail had learned it under intense scrutiny, perfecting leaps and partnering sequences with a focus that bordered on obsession. She smiled to herself, remembering how only a few months ago she'd been practicing alone in her cramped living room, uncertain if she'd ever be granted a professional stage. Footsteps approached. Mason, a freelance dancer she'd once hired for an afternoon, now stood on the performance staff, brought in last minute to fill a male ensemble spot. He offered Abigail a grin. "Ready?" he asked. She took a shaky breath. "As I'll ever be," she whispered back, letting a bubble of excitement stir in her gut. This was no mere audition. People had bought tickets, friends and families had gathered. Tonight, they expected a spectacle. She was part of that spectacle, no longer an outsider. Mason gave her a playful nudge. "Knock 'em dead!" She caught sight of her reflection in a stage mirror propped near a rack of costumes. The elegant lines of her makeup accented her eyes. A slight shimmer dusted across her cheekbones. No sign of the shy waitress who once used a Bentley window as a mirror. Now she saw a professional dancer about to claim her place under the lights. Music began. The stage manager waved the first group on. Abigail's part came a few minutes into the choreography, so she waited off stage, nerves humming, listening to the hush of the crowd as the performance commenced. She closed her eyes, recalling William's words. I'll be there in the front rows watching you shine." The memory of his unwavering encouragement steadied her. He'd become her anchor in this fast-moving world, a constant in her new reality. The time arrived. The stage manager signaled her group. Celeste's voice echoed in Abigail's head. Precise lines, fluid transitions, and expression that pulls the audience in. She stepped onto the stage, breath catching at the sea of watching eyes. But the lights overhead wrapped her in a warm glow, and the hush of the auditorium felt oddly intimate, as if she were dancing for each person there, heart to heart. She began. The ensemble wove patterns across the stage, each dancer interlocking with the others in sweeping arcs and staccato turns. Abigail found her mark in time with the music, focusing on every beat, every accent. A surge of pride and humility mingled in her chest. She had fought for this moment, and it was more exhilarating than she'd ever dared imagine. When it came time for her solo passage, the rest of the ensemble receded, leaving her to command the spotlight. She launched into a spiral turn, arms slicing the air in a fluid sweep. The combination was one she'd practiced countless times at the old studio, each movement etched into her muscle memory. Yet under the stage lights, it felt newly alive. She poured feeling into the final leap, letting her chest open wide, fingertips reaching for some invisible horizon. The crowd exhaled in a unified hush. Then the next dancer flowed in for a partnering sequence, a swirl of arms and contact that demanded trust. She remembered the tension of those first lessons, how uncertain she'd been. Now her body responded instantly, forging a dialogue of balance and weight with her partner. Their breath aligned, spinning them into a moment of pure synergy. Her lungs burned, her heart galloped, and every synapse in her brain crackled with the electricity of performance. When the lights dimmed at the piece's conclusion, thunderous applause erupted. She blinked through the glare, chest heaving, disbelief crashing over her. Just a few months ago, she'd served fries at a diner, uncertain if she'd ever see a professional stage. Now, she was the dancer she'd always dreamed of being. As the curtain fell, the dancers retreated backstage, sweaty and panting but buoyant. Abigail found Mason and they grasped each other's hands in an exuberant handshake. Then, the stage manager signaled them to prepare for a curtain call. Final bows. The audience roared anew. A sea of faces gleamed through the footlights. Abigail's gaze swept the front rows, and her pulse fluttered when she spotted William standing amidst the crowd, hands clapping, his expression alight with admiration. He'd come, as promised, to watch her triumph. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, the applause and the crowd faded, leaving only the warmth in his gaze. The curtain dropped a final time. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins. Another wave of applause muffled behind the heavy drape, but soon the lights came up in the auditorium and the dancers were free to exit. Abigail joined her castmates in a flurry of backstage congratulations, squeals, and quick hugs. The energy was infectious. Some were long-time Roseland members who found her excitement endearing, others teased her about newcomers' glow. She accepted the jokes good-naturedly. This was her family now, in a sense. When she slipped away to the dressing room, her phone buzzed. "William," she answered, pressing it to her ear. His voice bristled with pride and emotion. "You were brilliant. I'm outside the stage door if you have a moment." She peeked around the bustling space, dancers changing or heading off to greet family. "I'll be right there," she said, heart flipping. She grabbed a coat, quickly peeled off her performance shoes, and made her way through a maze of corridors toward the stage door. Outside, she found him waiting near a low wall, a jacket slung casually over one arm. His face lit with an open smile the moment he saw her. "Abigail," he said softly, holding out his hands. She placed hers in his, letting him draw her closer. "You came," she whispered, even though she knew he would. The late autumn evening air kissed her bare arms, but his presence radiated warmth. "I'm still not sure I didn't dream all of that." He laughed, brushing his fingertips against her cheek. "If you did, it's the most spectacular dream I've ever seen. You were mesmerizing on that stage." He hesitated, and she saw emotion flicker in his eyes. I can't tell you how proud I am, or how lucky I feel to have witnessed your journey." She felt a burst of gratitude, not just for his support, but for the fact that he stood there, wholly sincere, bridging the chasm between her once humble life and his affluent sphere. "Thank you for believing in me," she said, voice trembling. "It's meant more than you'll ever know." He tugged her gently to his side, and together they started walking away from the stage door, the hum of backstage celebration fading behind them. "I'm thinking we celebrate properly," he teased. "Unless you need to get back to your castmates?" She shook her head, smiling. "We're done for the night. I'll celebrate with them later. Right now, I'd love to grab dinner or anything that helps me come down from this high in a good way." William's grin broadened. "I have a restaurant in mind. It's quiet, has a perfect view of the city lights, and we can toast your debut." She leaned her head on his shoulder for a moment, letting out a soft sigh. "Perfect," she echoed. In the wake of adrenaline, she found a calming peace in his closeness, the sense that she wasn't alone in savoring this victory. They strolled through the labyrinth of hallways and out the theater's side entrance, stepping into the night. The city glowed with electric vibrancy, neon signs, street lamps, the distant hum of cars. As they made their way to his waiting car, she found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. The journey from that first audition morning, when she'd used the window of a stranger's Bentley to fix her hair, felt like a lifetime ago. Inside the car, William lifted a small box from the seat. "Before we go," he said quietly, "I wanted to give you something." He opened it, revealing a delicate silver pendant shaped like a dancer mid-leap, graceful lines and exquisite detail. Abigail's breath caught. "William, you didn't have to—" He pressed a fingertip to her lips. "Let me," he whispered. He unclasped the pendant and motioned for her to turn. Gently, he fastened it around her neck. She stroked the tiny figure resting against her collarbone, heart swelling with gratitude. "I love it," she murmured. "It's perfect." He curled an arm around her shoulders. "Just a small reminder of the dancer you've become, and the dancer you've always been, really." Their eyes locked, and in the hush that followed, she felt a rush of words unsaid. But the tenderness in his gaze told her that in time, they'd speak them all. Soon the Bentley glided through the night, whisking them toward a quiet hilltop restaurant. City lights sparkled below, a tapestry of possibility that mirrored the hope thrumming in Abigail's chest. She pressed her forehead to the cool window glass, watching the colors blur by. Her life was changed forever, both by her own grit and the presence of someone who believed in her dream as fiercely as she did. At the restaurant, they found a corner table overlooking the glowing skyline. Over warm, candlelit ambiance, they sipped sparkling water, laughed about backstage mishaps, and shared glimpses of what might come next. She told him about upcoming performances, possible tours, dreams of dancing at international festivals. He mentioned expansions for Harrison Enterprises, but confessed that since meeting her he'd started rethinking certain priorities, less about legacy, more about meaning. Abigail felt the flutter of something profound, a new horizon she hadn't dared to imagine. After dinner, they lingered outside, the breeze rippling through her hair. She turned to him, the moonlight revealing quiet emotion in his eyes. "Thank you," she repeated, though the words seemed insufficient. "I used to think dancing would be the only love in my life. But now—" She broke off, unsure how to express the intensity of feeling. He took her hands gently. "Now," he echoed, stepping closer, "we can share your love for dance, and maybe find our own story in the process." She blinked back tears, nodding slowly. Then, under the hush of the star-sprinkled sky, he leaned in with careful tenderness. This time, there was no hesitation. Their lips met softly at first, then warming into an embrace that spoke of trust, respect, and an unspoken vow. The city lights sparkled around them, a backdrop to the quiet, significant moment. When they finally drew apart, she smiled through the tears that glistened on her lashes, feeling no shame in showing him her vulnerable joy. In his eyes, she saw her own wonder reflected back, two different worlds coming together with unexpected ease. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Tomorrow, she'd return to rehearsals, to the rigorous life of a professional dancer at Roseland. She'd push herself to new heights, traveling, performing, living the dream she'd nurtured since she was a girl. But now, as William's arms wrapped around her, she realized that dreams could expand to include the warmth of another person's presence. Under the vast night sky, she inhaled the crisp air, cherishing the swirl of possibilities that lay ahead. Love, dance, and the promise of countless twirling steps on stages far and wide. She'd found her footing, discovered her stage, and opened her heart to something precious. And as she and William stood together, one step out of the spotlight but still shining in each other's eyes, Abigail understood that her once lonely leaps had led her here, to a new beginning more beautiful than any solo performance could ever be. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.